Good evening. Welcome to the special meeting of the Board of School Directors regarding enrollment and facilities, addressing enrollment growth, facilities planning, and student achievement. Before I turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland and the administration, I want to provide some background and context for this evening's meeting. Tonight's meeting is not a formal business meeting, but rather a special meeting of the board to continue the ongoing discussion related to the expansion of facilities in response to the unprecedented increase in student enrollment in the district. Tonight's meeting will focus on the 4 secondary schools and the various issues pertaining to increased enrollment on their respective campuses. Last month, on May 23rd, we held a public work session focusing on growth and enrollment at our 6 elementary schools. This meeting was very well attended and valuable information and feedback was shared. Tonight's meeting is the 6th special meeting of the year related specifically to enrollment growth and facilities planning. In February, the administration presented to the board and the public 8 strategies under consideration, and we followed up with a recent mailer that you should have received in your mail, which is also electronically on the website, sharing the myriad factors related to planning for this growth throughout the district. Our meeting this evening will be organized with presentations from each of our middle and high school principals, followed by facility-specific issues from Mr. Ganan and some summative commentary from Mr. Copeland. After each presentation, I will open the floor first for board questions and then for public comment following each school's presentation for about 15 to 20 minutes per school. Please sign up with Mr. Orlando on the middle or high school specific sheet to provide your comment or question. After all comments are heard for each school, Mr. Copeland and the administration will respond to as many questions as they are able. We will continue to add to our frequently asked questions on enrollment growth, which can be found on our website. In addition to public comment this evening, we released following the May 23rd public work session an electronic survey that solicits input from the district community on the issues discussed. As always, we welcome feedback on community comments at lmsd.org. The feedback from both the special meetings as well as that collected from the survey will be analyzed during the summer, presented and shared with the public at another special meeting when we return in the fall to ensure as much participation from the community as possible. Your input is important to the board, and we also encourage members of the public to raise questions as well as provide feedback and commentary for the board to consider as we move closer to making decisions informed by district core values, which include maintaining current academic, co-curricular, and extracurricular programming, class size target, strategic plan implementation, all while being mindful of ongoing district financial constraints. Additionally, feedback will be integrated into a district-wide needs assessment that considers enrollment growth and facilities issues K-12 at all 10 schools and will guide our decision-making and ask consideration from the Lower Marion Township Commissioners in the upcoming months. I want to reiterate that the board was reminded of the community values, particularly during the strategic planning and superintendent search processes. The board takes the values of small class size, maintaining and enhancing curricular programming, and attending neighborhood elementary schools very seriously and thoughtfully considers them in each of our decisions along with the related costs. Our survey asked the public to share their thoughts on these values as well. While we will not make any decisions tonight, we will gather information for future decisions. I will now turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland.
That introduction, there's not much left. I will thank you, Dr. Van Lynch. Just to go some brief introductory comments. First, just to respond to some issues that came up in the last meeting. The last meeting we had, as Dr. Van Lynch said, focused solely on the elementary schools. One of the things that we've been looking at over a period of time is whether it was possible to have another larger purchase of land so that we could have a middle school, and many folks indicated that the seminary was a place to look. We sort of indicated from our sources, sort of voce, that that's probably not on the horizon because of litigation. There was an article today, I think it was, in Philly.com that basically said that property is in litigation and will not be available for some time, and even if it is, it may not be available for us, and certainly not in any time that we have to wait. Secondly, there was a proposal put forth by residents of Penwyn Elementary School that I don't have the sketch, but it talked about a bus loop entering out, I think, Mr. Gannon, onto Haverford Road. We were about to go to PennDOT to see, because Haverford Road is a county road, or is it a state road? I'm not sure. State road, for permission. And before that, I said to Mr. Gannon, at least show it to the township and say, is this something that you would look favorably on before we go through the process of the application and the expense of that and drawings and so forth? He's done that, and the township has basically come back and said that's probably not something that the district should continue to venture towards or spend money to investigate. So those are two things that were hanging from the last meeting that I just wanted to come back to. This evening we have our secondary school principals here. They're going to go through really displaying, just like the elementaries did, how their buildings are laid out, what they use the buildings for. Often when you look at a facilities plan, you get the enrollment numbers and the list of buildings or the list of classrooms and so forth and so on. But without putting sort of a story to the program to that, it's been my experience that you can make decisions that are absent the actual use of the building, and the best people to talk about that are the principals there. When we talk about staffing and we talk about facilities, one of the things I've always done is said to principals, you really need to schedule out the building. You really need to physically say, if we have this many more students, schedule it out in a mock schedule. What's that going to look like? How's that going to work? What's in the best interest of students? So to the best of our knowledge, we've done that around what were the highest projected enrollments. And for members of the public and the board, I want to remind you, last year we did 2 demographic studies so that we could triangulate and get a better sense as to what we thought the highest projected enrollments would be. And we also looked at trends, and that's going to really come forward tonight as we look at the way our students are choosing science and STEM programs in our secondary schools, and our willingness and our desire to make sure that they continue to have the options that we think are inherent in the values that Dr. Van Lynch was talking about in Lower Marion. For the middle schools, if you've been followers of the program, I don't know that much will be new tonight. We've talked about the middle schools throughout the fall as we look to making accommodations, particularly at Ballackinwood, but we want to review those for you. Key to the middle school concept is the team teaching, and we'll show why, in order to make some accommodations for that, space is needed. At the high school, we've looked at the schedule, we've looked at the staffing, and in some ways you can say, if you want a sort of a traditional 1960s, 70s, 80s classroom environment, you probably might be able to get away without any extra space, but we'll be able to show that science is driving much of our needs, making sure that we have enough science classrooms, because students are asking for double the science kinds of situations that we've got. Just as an aside, I emailed Dr. Jamie Savadoff, who was the superintendent when the high schools were built, and I said, you didn't build them big enough. He's a man of very little humor. He didn't seem to see the joke in that. Apparently there was some controversy at that time. I will leave off his comments from that, but I know Dr. Savadoff. We also want to remind folks that we've got the Arnold Field situation, and we'll be doing a brief presentation on that, as well as the issue of busing and where we put buses and how we'll accommodate that. This has been, I think, a thorough process. I welcome the questions from the board and the public. I really want to thank the administrators for delving into this in a very, very strong way. I also want to say that this is, this is my 3rd superintendency, and you don't learn everything about a district all at once. And sometimes it's in these kinds of incidental ways that you really begin to sit back and view the quality or the programs that are in the district. So we were going through the high school scheduling. Scott Kilpatrick, one of our assistant principals, was going through it with me, and he said, let me show you a sample student schedule. And he wanted to show the complexity of a student who was really filling up on a lot of AP courses and a lot of what we call singleton courses, where they're only offered once or twice a day. And the difficulty of the schedule, and I'm looking at the schedule, at the bottom of the schedule, I said, it says here the student is taking adaptive physical education. And he said, well, what they do is we have a physical education course where students can work with our high need students as in a buddy program. And so their phys ed is helping their fellow students, whether it's in the pool or in different physical education. That's an extraordinary program, and one that is growing in both of our middle schools. And that was something that I found out incidentally through this process, and it's one of the reasons why I'm very proud to be associated with this school district. So with that, Mr. Ganan, by the slide, I guess we're starting off with Bala Cynwyd Middle School. Is that the plan? Okay. Mr. Potton?
I got the little pointer if you want to use it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I've got this. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me this evening. As pointed out by both Dr. Van Lynch and Mr. Copeland, what I hope to be able to show you is the impact mostly in terms of program and how we schedule with the enrollment growth. Bala Cynwyd Middle School is a beautiful building. It was built in 1939. So I share that with you because it's important when we go through the floor plan, when I speak to the idea of proximity, when I speak to the idea of teaming and where students are. In a building that was built in 1939, we have to consider flow, because those of you who've been in that building know the hallways are narrow. So if you're thinking about moving 900 students through that building, it's important to note that. So I will begin, once I get there, with the basement. There are 4 floors for Bala Cynwyd. The basement floor contains the cafeteria, which means at some point all students need to get to that point. It also contains our tech ed classrooms, which will be used for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as we've adjusted in terms of the new schedule. And the kitchen, and we are looking at and considering with the growth in enrollment as well, the idea and concept of the flow of students into the service area and then out into the seating area. The health rooms are down here. This is an important note because when I go to the next slide, you'll see that right above the cafeteria and the health rooms is a gymnasium. So when we looked at, these were actually converted locker rooms. These had been locker rooms prior to, I believe, about 4 years ago.
Yes.
Okay. And they were converted to health classrooms with increase in size that we had at that time. We placed these as health classrooms because it allows for the physical education teachers to go up and down this stairwell, so it's easy for them to get back and forth, with the students. This is our first floor, and as you'll see here, again, we have the gym, which all students must access at some point. Your stairwells to the gym are here, and the main stairwell, which is where most of the 6th grade students. When we think about teaming, which is a concept that Mr. Copeland spoke to, and I've spoken to you several times at the board, the concept of teaming is essential to middle school programming. You try to make sure that the students you make the size of the school smaller by making sure they have the same groups of teachers. The concept of teaming was something when we went through the middle school schedule program that we deemed essential to maintain. It was valued not only by staff, but it was valued by parents, as well as the idea of common planning time so that they had the time to work with and discuss the students with each other. So when we think about teaming, we have our 7th grade teams clustered here, okay, in this area. And we have some of our related arts, which is our chorus classrooms here, our art classrooms, chorus here, FCS, and art classrooms in terms of our related arts. And our instrumental music room is down here. So as I mentioned when we were speaking to the concept and idea of flow and where students go, 7th grade students tend to stay in this area, with the exception of those students who are part of the Communique program, which is the floor above in this area. When they're moving through the building to the gym, when they're moving to the cafeteria, the stairwells they use are here and here. They go up to the world language. So again, it keeps those students and that flow clustered to one area. 8th grade students, currently with the schedule, access mostly this area, and the majority of 8th grade classrooms are on this side of the building. So what that allows, again, is that flow of students up and down in terms of the 8th grade wing without necessarily intersecting that often with the 7th grade students. Okay? We have 2 computer labs here and a small group instruction. I point those out because this formerly had been a large group instruction room, which had been converted into 3 classrooms. It was the old library when the building was originally built. We now move to the main floor, which is the floor you walk in on from Bryn Mawr Avenue. Again, we have Communique, which I mentioned here, right above the 7th grade. We have some of our special education classrooms, specialized learning support. In these 2 areas, we are actually looking at moving them into a similar area and again allowing for proper flow. This is our 8th grade interdisciplinary, and these are important to note because those classrooms, as an interdisciplinary classroom, have a movable wall. So when we're thinking about where we have to have those interdisciplinary teams, we have to consider that space and where that wall is. And having asked Mr. Gannon to look into that with some of the changes and things that we're going, I do know that those walls add significant additional costs in terms of looking at renovations of places. Our world language classrooms are in this back hallway. Again, allows for 7th grade to come up and access and 8th grade to come from this way and access. The majority of 8th grade classrooms are here. We had converted and changed the office location. These used to be classrooms, which is now the main office when we look at a captured vestibule and allowing an entryway into the building, and that allowed for the creation of additional classrooms here. In addition, we used to have a wrestling room, which also was used as a fitness room, which was converted into classrooms here. So that is no longer available. We've moved the fitness equipment, which is used mostly with students with identified needs, in this smaller classroom here, where they have much of the equipment. The auditorium at this time seats it seats 1,000. It's not changing, which means that we are having to move to. We cannot hold full class assemblies, or full school assemblies anymore. We'll have to make adjustments to that next year with the growth in enrollment. Here. And finally, we move to the 3rd floor, and what you've not heard me speak too much is 6th grade, and that's because we have clustered the majority of our 6th grade on the 3rd floor. So these are all 6th grade classrooms. We did add additional locker space up on the 3rd floor, and knowing that the growth in enrollment was coming, we did add double lockers, so top and bottom lockers, which was important from the idea of making sure that we had enough lockers for students, but at the same time, when you think about the size of those hallways, we had to be thoughtful about how and when we allowed students to go to the lockers, because once you basically doubled the number of students in that hallway accessing the lockers at the same time. Again, looking at the idea of how they move throughout the building, the 6th grade will move downstairs through these stairwells, the main stairwell here, this stairwell here, and there's a 3rd stairwell over here, depending on where they're going. And most often when they go downstairs, they are accessing, and I'm going to go back from it just to show you, accessing again either world language or going all the way down to the related arts areas for computers, art, FCS, choral, or instrumental music. One thing to note that we have done, based on the growth in enrollment that we've already had in the additional classrooms, we did move 2 6th grade classrooms downstairs. This is a 6th grade classroom currently, and this is a 6th grade classroom as well. Again, the idea there of easy flow for the students coming down this stairwell into this classroom and this back stairwell. This is part of that team. We say Team 6-3, so it allows for that easy transition for students to get to that classroom. So I think I mentioned most of these, but some of the things that we have had to look at are things that we have had to do based on the the growth that we've already had is the large group instruction room, which is the old library, was converted into 3 classrooms. The fitness and wrestling room, which was converted into 2 additional classrooms. The locker rooms, which were converted into the health classrooms, were added. We have had the offices. We have had offices that have been converted into small group instructional rooms, which then makes the closets, some storage closets that we've had have had to be converted into offices. Okay. Looking forward, and I am going to go back a minute in terms of, well, after I speak to these, I want to go back in terms of the map and show you what we're thinking again in terms of the flow. But the music computer lab that we have that is used for all of the music classes, most specifically the general music, but instrumental goes in there as well as choral music, will have to be converted into a classroom. The computer classrooms will have to be converted into classrooms, which would make the computer classes mobile, going from room to room. With the additional growth coming in 8th grade, we're going to have to transition our 7th grade interdisciplinary program in terms of where they teach science and how they teach science, because their science lab is going to have to become an 8th grade classroom. The reason being, when we think about what is necessary for that 8th grade curriculum versus 7th grade curriculum, that lab has gas, natural gas, which is used in the 8th grade. It is not used in 7th grade. So we are actually looking at and converting this year, or hoping to convert this year, with the additional growth that we have and with the approval of the modular classrooms, one of these classrooms becoming a 7th grade science classroom. What that means is the addition of sinks, because that's what is needed for those science classrooms, in addition to furniture and other things. But the gas line is not necessary for that 7th grade curriculum. This is the classroom here that would be converted from a 7th grade science to an 8th grade science due to the need of gas. These are the computer classrooms which will be converted to 8th grade classrooms, making these classrooms mobile. I mentioned the approval in terms of the modular classrooms. If not having those, what would have had to happen is the world language program would have had to have become mobile in order to accommodate the additional teams that we have both in 6th and 7th grade to add for the students, as well as the idea of the music computer lab and the computer classrooms becoming mobile the following year. So without additional space, what happens is many of those programs in terms of become mobile, it changes in terms of that flow of classroom and flow of the teaming without any additional building at all. And if we were looking at how do we schedule that, because I do know that when teachers don't have students, the room might be open because we do have those common planning times. What that would do is that would eliminate teaming. That would eliminate common planning time without any additional space, because we would be planning to have teachers in rooms when they were open. So we would not be able to balance, for example, the 6th grade would not be able to balance when they have those classes at the same time, which would not allow for the teaming and not allow for the common planning time. Okay. When we think about the core spaces, cafeteria and the serving area, and I know Mr. Gannan can speak to that as well, but what we currently have from a square footage is not adequate in terms of our size. It's 334, I believe, is the serving that we have. So we are looking at ways to expand that, but also looking at ways to add additional seating. The gymnasium and library are adequate, and it's how we are going to schedule those. From a space perspective, we will be looking at having 3 sections of phys ed running at the same time, which means that the small gym, which is by the auditorium, behind the auditorium, as well as the large gym, will be used to section off, two sections in the large gym with 1 section in the small gym. Right now, we currently have 1 in each that are scheduled. The art and music spaces are adequate when we look at the numbers and with the adjustment to the new schedule. I mentioned the auditorium. The auditorium as a core space, if we're looking again at that idea of full school assemblies, no longer suits that, and we will be having to adjust when we offer assemblies to accommodate for grade level or a combination of 2 grade levels. When we look at special education and the specialized programs, they are adequate spaces that we have. The computer rooms will be, again, looking to become mobile in the coming years with the additional enrollment. I know you've seen all these numbers before. With our highest projected enrollment coming at 1175 in 2021-2022, this is what we've begun to prepare and plan for when we think of staffing and space in the building. Turn it over to Mr. Gannan.
So I'm going to speak briefly now about the capacity of the building. And what you're looking at here is a table from our building capacity study. It's very similar to the tables you saw when we talked about the elementary schools. What's different about capacity for a middle school is that you can see there's a variety of different rooms. We are only giving capacity to general classrooms and to our science rooms. Again, we've showed PDE side by side, but I've spoken about the PDE standards earlier. They are strictly created for construction and renovation reimbursement purposes, and they have not changed since 1973. So by going through the building, we're looking at the capacity of classrooms and science rooms, and then we're also going to use a utilization factor that's different from an elementary school. In elementary, we use 90%. In the middle school, we're using 85%. And again, a lot of that is designed to accommodate the teaming concept. So right now, the building itself has an optimum classroom capacity of 939. So when we compare that to our highest projected enrollment out in the year 21-22, we can see that we fall up short. We come up short. So we are planning to put temporary classrooms in place this summer. So this chart then shows the addition of those 6 classrooms with the capacity that goes along with them. Again, utilizing our 85% utilization factor. We see that this gives us enough to handle the projected enrollment for next year. The following year, the principal anticipates having to repurpose 2 of those computer labs he talked about. So that would give us some additional capacity, and we compare that against what's projected for 18-19. And again, it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape. The classrooms may spill over into the following academic year, and that projected enrollment is only 4 students higher than what you see there. So that, based on projections, we should be have adequate space. But as we know, we have talked about doing a permanent addition to the school. And the concept we've discussed is adding 12 permanent classrooms. So this table shows what the capacity of the building would be with those 12 classrooms. And again, comparing it to the highest projected enrollment, we see that the 12 classrooms would be adequate.
Pat, let me just jump in here. One of the things that we've been looking at over a period of time is whether or not there was even the feasibility, whether we haven't even gotten to the point where we think it's a good thing for the community, but is there a feasibility for 5 through 8 middle schools? Are we going to have, if we had 3 5 through 8 middle schools, what would that do? Well, that would alleviate any stress on the elementary schools by pulling the 5th grade out and not necessitate this building. As we've continued to work with our real estate professional, and as things like the seminary continue to say that's not going to happen, it looks less and less likely we're able to do that. I just wanted to emphasize that it was never the intent that we would weather the enrollment growth through modular classrooms. It was going to be either a construction project or a third middle school. So what Mr. Gannan is showing is making an assumption that the board hasn't made a decision on yet, but at least allowing so that we can have conversation about the permanent instruction. Sorry about that.
Right. So we're going to talk briefly about the site here. And I know you all want to hear about arrival and dismissal, so Mr. Potton's going to address that.
So when we look at the site, this is Bryn Mawr Avenue. We have two bus circles. We have one off of Bryn Mawr and one off of Manayunk Avenue. This is a small loop, which allows for, I want to say, 3 to 4 buses to be able to park and wait and sitting. And this is what we refer to as our large loop, where the buses will come in the morning and drop off, and then we'll be waiting in terms of dismissal. What tends to be a concern and a problem when we think of flow of traffic, particularly in the morning, the traffic on Bryn Mawr Avenue with drop-off, they go through this small inner loop. We do have people out there directing traffic, but with limited parking, particularly limited parking when people are running into the building and dropping off and they can't find parking. Sometimes they will stop here without us necessarily saying that that's okay. But they will stop to run in, which creates a backup in terms of the flow. And what then tends to happen, and we have taken some steps, we have signs here that ask to have no left turns out of this loop between the hours of 7:30 and 9, because what happens is as the traffic is coming in this direction, it gets backed up to pull in this circle, and it creates literally a closed loop where no one is able to move. And there have been times when I've had to run out onto Bryn Mawr Avenue to be able to direct traffic. In addition, what you'll see is there is street parking all down Bryn Mawr Avenue. There is the additional parking once we get to the staff parking lot that is here. We're going to be adding some sidewalks to allow for the additional parking that will be added along the field here. As well as neighborhood parking on the side streets. So that is where staff and a great example of the parking and the concerns that we have, and I'm sorry, I don't necessarily have a solution to this at this time, but if you would care to come by tomorrow during promotion, you will be able to see some of the parking concerns that we have.
I wanted to use this overhead picture to point out that there's actually 2 pieces of property involved with Bala-Cynwyd. The first piece of property is where the school proper sits, and it actually shares the same piece of property with Cynwyd Elementary School. I think I mentioned this before, but it's about a 14-acre property. But there's a separate property across the street that we refer to as Amherst Field, and it is primarily sports fields. And as Mr. Potton pointed out, as part of our approval to put in the temporary classrooms, we were given a couple of tasks. One of those tasks is to put a sidewalk along here. Parking's already authorized here. The sidewalk will make it more attractive. We also have a condition of approval to have our traffic engineer come back in the fall after school starts and things get going and study this whole situation to determine if it would be wise to consider making Bryn Mawr Avenue a one-way street during times of pickup and drop-off, or maybe just pick up in the afternoon, whatever. And I think that the most sensible thing to do if we're going to do that is to have it be one way from here all the way down to here. But we'll be taking a look at that. Mr. Tavani will be taking a look at that for us this fall. So I just wanted to go over some basic zoning information about the 2 pieces of property. So this diagram is flipped, so the school's on the bottom and Amherst Field is on the top. As I mentioned, the school is on the same site as Cynwyd Elementary. The zoning district is R4, and we are allowed 44% impervious, and we are maxed out. In fact, we're beyond max because we're in the middle of definition and redefinitions of impervious surface. The running track became impervious, so we actually have more than 44%. The bottom line is we have no additional impervious to expand. So in order to expand on the site, We're going to have to remove impervious and then be able to build based on that, or we're going to have to go to the zoning hearing board and request a variance for additional impervious or some combination of the two. And in fact, we have done this to get the temporary classroom approval. We did get a 2% temporary variance in order to accommodate the classroom and the parking that was required. And then we were also able to get permission to hold that parking in reserve and not build it. Amherst Field, by contrast, is wide open, so to speak. Makes sense. It's an athletic field. There's very little impervious surface there, and it again is R4 zoning.
So I'd like to open it up for board questions at this time, and then also if you're interested in raising questions specific to Ballard Kenwood Middle School, if you could also sign up with Mr. Orlando at this time. So are there questions from the board on my right side? Mr. Driscoll?
Thank you, Pat. I do want to, some people may not know this, but even though Amherst Field is part of the campus, I believe for zoning reasons they are considered two different parcels. Because I believe we had talked about, you know, maybe should you have to put parking or do something with Amherst Field, but my understanding is that they are two different parcels, and that's how the township is looking. Is that still correct?
That's correct. We had thought about trying to make an argument for additional impervious based on some theoretical combination of the two. However, we fell off that argument in the process of coordinating with neighbors for the temporary classrooms. One of the things that we found out is that there's not a lot of support in the neighborhood for additional parking to be built on the site. There is parking up and down Manayunk Road. There's parking, as Mr. Potton pointed out, along here, but also on these side streets. And in fact, Mr. Tavani in his traffic study was able to outline a great amount of parking that's available during the day. So I think that as we continue the discussion about parking, there's going to be support to not have all the parking requirement met by building on the site. I think the statement from one of the members of the Civic, the Marion Park Civic, was that we want our kids to play on the fields and the cars be in the street and not vice versa.
Mrs. Pollard?
Mr. Potton and Pat, thank you. The flow of everything is really good, and no pun intended, but I did not see where the bathrooms are.
So, my apologies. There are bathrooms at every level. Just give me a second to go back. So this being the third floor, there are bathrooms here for the third floor, as well as staff bathrooms in other locations. So there's one bathroom upstairs on the third floor, and at each level there are 4 bathrooms. Okay, as well as bathrooms in the cafeteria. Okay.
Oh, Ms. Robinson?
We just approved a new schedule that allows for 3 minutes between classes. And I just wanted you to speak to, if possible, how the kids are going to get from the third floor, for example, to the cafeteria and back and those kind of things.
Okay. With the, we have had the 3 minutes in terms of in the schedule for a number of years now. What we find is that when the students, begin to transition, it's, it takes them time, and in terms of from, being held accountable and accountability piece, it's not tight, so to say, at the beginning with students getting there. But once they determine and find that flow, and in terms of which stairwells to use, and we do help students navigate that, they become efficient at doing it. One of the things that I will say, when they're moving from one class to the class across the hall, they'll still take 3 minutes because they will use the time they have. But in terms of getting from the third floor downstairs, at first it's a concern in terms of them getting there. We try to ease that anxiety in terms of helping them. Teachers walk them down, but they do get that, and they are able to get there in an efficient amount of time.
In terms of the building itself, how does a student, say, on crutches or something, get around?
There are elevators. There is, sorry, Pat. There are elevators that go to each level. This is an elevator here that goes down to the main floor, and then that students will use in terms of if they're on crutches. And then there is an elevator here that will go all the way down to the cafeteria. So there is a transition if a student has to go from the 3rd floor where they'll have to, either wheelchair or crutches, they do come across. They always have a helper with them in terms of, either another student or a staff member, depending on what the injury is. But that transition, and then they will go down to the cafeteria. We also allow for early release time for those students.
One of the questions I raised at the last session was this notion of adequate versus ideal. So could you speak to, because it sounds like Malik Kenwood Middle School has already made some very tough choices in terms of space utilization. So I'm wondering if you could talk about, what's essentially, adequate. Are we talking about this is the best we can do? And then what would be ideal from your perspective on some of the core spaces as well as some of the academic spaces with regard to adequate versus ideal?
Okay. Well, I'll begin with some of the core spaces. With the cafeteria to begin, when we think of the idea of adequate, even though, and I know Mr. Gannan will speak to this, from a square footage and seating capacity, right now we are beyond that, so we're looking to add that. The ideal would be to expand and to allow for above 400 students with additional space for service area, as well as seating. When we think about the phys ed space, again, with the idea of the additional sections, not that in terms of adding another gym, but the idea of, well, what other options might there be when we think about physical education. So losing the fitness room and losing the wrestling room, it takes away that, possibility of, another space that could be used for physical education, for a different section, for a different course. So again, that adequate versus, the ideal. The other piece is, as we are looking at expanding with the enrollment, when we think about our interdisciplinary programs. Communique, for instance, right now is, although it's a larger classroom, it is not two classrooms that has that wall. So that's why they have the additional science lab that is downstairs, because this is not a space where they would have science, so to say. So again, thinking of that space of two separate classrooms, one being a science lab, making it, in terms of the wall, the movable wall, so to say, to be able to be used, put back and forth. The loss of the computer classrooms, the concept or idea of world language being, mobile, I think that hinders those programs. So when we think about ideal, ideally we would want them to have a space. We would want them to be able to display their room in a way that displays the culture of the language, as well as computers and the idea of being mobile. It takes away from the possibility of when you think about it, if we want to get into the idea or concept of with the 3D printing, the programming, the different devices that you have, it takes away that possibility. It limits you in terms of what you're able to do from a programmatic standpoint.
Thank you. Ms. Copeland?
I think adequate is, it can be in the eye of the beholder. What can you deal with, what can you not deal with? I think Jason's done a good job of explaining it. At the end of this, we're going to talk about what we feel is not adequate, and that's the cafeteria spaces. The cafeteria spaces, Mr. Gannan and his staff have worked with the township, and they basically said you can continue with the spaces that you have. In other words, we can fit the students in. We're going to make the recommendation that we think we can do better, and that we think we should expand those spaces so that they go from a fairly confined experience for kids to something that's we think more appropriate in keeping with what we value.
Thank you. Questions? Dr. Gilbert?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I was actually going to ask about the cafeteria space, so I'll wait on that. I just have one question then, which is, you may have mentioned this, and there was a lot of information, so I apologize if you already said this, but I know at Welsh Valley, before we did the addition, the nursing, the nursing and health for students was a really big problem at Welsh Valley in terms of, ensuring privacy for students and those things. And that was one of the big things we did when we redid Welsh Valley. So what's the situation for you?
Our nursing suite is right here. And it is, I'll say the term adequate at this time. When we look at, it does have an entry, and then once in where the nurses station are, there is a section room here where it is privacy for the students. Having been in Welsh Valley's nursing station, it's very different. But it has not been of concern in terms of our inability to be able to do what is necessary for students with our current nursing station.
Mr. Bonaventura?
Thanks. I'm curious, if you can go to, I guess it's slide 10 that has the percent utilization factor. Now, one big reason why the PD number and the LMSD number is different is PD assigns students to classrooms that, would only be used by a certain grade once or twice a day, and so
That's correct.
So you have to. So I understand that the discrepancy in the total number of capacity, but in terms of the utilization factor, because we're not using those other spaces, or we're not adding those other spaces in, I'm wondering whether our utilization factor might be closer to the 90%, especially in a building with only 3 grades. So I guess my question is, do we know what our current utilization percentage is in this building?
I don't know.
Well,
Do you know? I mean,
I don't have a specific.
this is the percent. Oh, I'm sorry.
this is a utilization factor we're using for planning purposes. So I think I can address it this way. The 85% is a recommended value recognized by architects and planners for a middle school as opposed to something different. And the fact that we only give capacity to those regular classrooms and to the science rooms, and we use this 85%, those combined together give you what you need to be able to schedule the team concept and have some of those better than adequate situations like foreign language is not on a cart.
Right, but I'm still curious at what percentage we're working at right now. I mean, so is on slide 10, is that the current capacity? Or is that the capacity with the additions?
No, that's the current capacity, but it doesn't reflect the current schedule. If you're asking what the utilization of the building is, I'm assuming we'd have to go back and check how each room is being utilized for every period of the day,
Well,
and calculate something.
No, not necessarily. What's the total number of students?
We have 901 students.
901?
So we're probably a little bit below that 85% right now.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks.
Ms. Ackman?
Hi, thanks. I wanted to see if you could update us on, I've heard rumors who was moving to the temporary classrooms, and also, I also was wondering if the kids would get extra, I think that will be an adjustment in terms of getting in and out in a timely fashion. And I also, not to belabor the point, but in terms of adequate, I know that the library is very heavily used, and because of the schedule change, there may be needs for some more flex space for specials or, non-core space. So I just wanted to make sure that you and others were thinking about that, and maybe there were ways to make the library a little more flexible for other needs. I don't know. Thanks.
I'm going to address the library first?
Yeah.
Okay, just because it's here. So when we think about the library, we have looked at that, and we've thought about, ways to perhaps, think of with scheduling in different pieces. The piece about our library, which I will argue is the best space in the district, I'm partial. I'm okay with that. But it's open, and we would not want to change that. So depending on what that class trying to teach in that open setting, with the additional space, it does make it very difficult. So it tends to, in terms of the instruction that takes place there, tends to be dependent upon what the project is or what the program is at that time. So it's not ideal, or for that matter, adequate for certain things. But we have looked at that. The one space that we haven't decided on yet and is a possibility, but it's smaller, there is a computer lab. It's called, we refer to it as the library computer lab. It is used for classrooms that don't necessarily have technology to book, so to say, and go in there. When we think about that idea of the computer classrooms becoming mobile, we have talked about this becoming that space, at least for one of the classrooms, or an area for them to begin. But that is smaller than an average classroom. Okay. In terms of the modular classrooms, if we're thinking about that site, overhead site picture, the modular classrooms are going on the track, the infield of the track. When we think about, again, that flow of students, so who is going out there is 7th and 8th grade math. 6th grade math is not going. There's one 7th grade math classroom that is staying inside because there are 7 classrooms for math. We are shifting in terms of where the majority of our 8th grade, and with the addition of the 6th grade team, so these classrooms next year are going to become 6th grade classrooms. These classrooms here will be all 8th grade classrooms. In terms of gaining access and again getting downstairs to the modulars, you would be going down this stairwell and it's right down here. And if I look at 7th grade, again, these are your 7th grade classrooms. These classrooms will become another 7th grade team. And the space, there is an exit here to get to the modulars, as well as for students to get here. Okay, so again, that idea and concept of flow in terms of them getting there, and it may be something we have to adjust without knowing it this time.
So no new 6th grade parents are going to have a kid in the modulars, which may make our lives a little easier in the fall.
Unless they are accelerated in terms of mathematics.
Oh, I see.
So
6th grade advanced math.
Not advanced, and pre-algebra will be in.
Okay.
But if there are 6th grade students, and these are exceptions, who might take an Algebra 1,
right.
There may be one student, they could be scheduled in one of those classrooms.
Okay, but that's a small
yes.
group. Okay, thank you.
Okay, please.
Just quickly, how many classrooms do you have assigned per grade? Like the regular classrooms, not all this, not all the support, not
so
choral rooms.
Okay.
Just regular classrooms and science rooms.
If we've taken math off team in 7th and 8th grade, and what that means is the math teachers, because of the courses and the leveling of classes, it allows us to be more flexible with how we schedule and when we schedule them. So knowing that math is off team, there is a social studies, language, arts, and science classroom on every team. We've added a team in 7th grade and the interdisciplinary team. So we're looking at 11 classrooms in 7th grade. In 6th grade, we have math is on team, so there are actually 4 classrooms. There are 3 full teams, 12 plus 2 interdisciplinary, so 16 in 6th grade. And that number in 8th grade would be 8, because the 2 teams this year, our 8th grade number is not as high in terms of the enrollment. It hasn't hit 8th grade yet, so there are only 2 full teams in the interdisciplinary team.
2 full in the interdisciplinary?
Yes.
And a team is 3?
Yes, if you think of social studies, language, arts, and science.
Thanks.
Any additional questions from the board? Okay, we'll move now to public comment on Bala Cynwyd Middle School. Mr. Orlando, could you call our first speaker?
Heather Band.
We're going to need you to come to the mic, and if you could tell us your name and generally where you reside in the district.
Okay, Heather Batt. I'm on Ott Road, which is around the corner from BC. And I had 3 different questions. One is a follow-up on the modular classrooms. When you were going through it, it now looks like to me, but I wanted to validate, that 6th grade has classrooms on multiple different levels.
They are.
So how do 6th graders brand new to the school in the first few weeks figure out how to do this?
So, I'm sorry, it'll probably be easier, Ms. Batt, if you ask all your questions and then we'll respond.
Okay, sounds good. My second question or comment is thank you for looking at the traffic, because I want to just add to what you shared before. The other complexity is that Kinwood is a few feet away. And so between drop-offs between both schools, the magnitude of walkers between the schools, the drop-offs, the pickups, the buses, it is extremely dangerous for the kids, the drivers, the parents, the teachers, and there is nowhere to go. So I don't totally believe the study that there's a lot of neighborhood parking, but I just want to add that you also have the Kinwood complexity. I would add, even when you pick up for after-school sports, it is hard to find a spot to pull over safely to be able to get your child. And my other question or comment in talking about the space is relative to the gyms. My son, I have one child that's graduating BC and one graduating Kinwood, so we'll be entering BC. My child leaving BC was on the basketball teams and could not even have practice in the gyms more than like twice a week because of the wrestling room that already got converted. So the girls' basketball team, the boys' basketball team, and the wrestling team all have to share one gym for sports. So I would just add some questions about the vision of after-school activities and how that does or doesn't get weighed into all this.
Thank you, Mr. Patton.
In terms of sixth grade, as mentioned, looking towards next year, the sixth grade, these will remain sixth grade classrooms. With the addition of the team, the interdisciplinary team in sixth grade, what we've done, this is the stairwell that goes right upstairs, and just for purpose, this stairwell here, where students can go down, up and down, comes out right here. And what we've done is we've made this the new sixth grade team, the interdisciplinary team, and the additional sixth grade classroom, which is here now over here, so that, again, we're clustering those sixth grade students in one area. In terms of students who are transitioning, depending on what team they're on, they do take tours, they do go around the building, and they will kind of work with them on the best way to get from classroom to classroom.
In terms of the athletics, this is it's a district-wide concern. We would like to expand the amount, particularly at the middle schools, of intramural and after-school sports, but particularly in the wintertime, it's a challenge because we've got limited space. And during the time that the modulars are at BC, we're going to have to make accommodations for some sports off-site also. So I think this goes, I mean, one of the things that we wanted to accomplish this evening was to talk about, honestly, some of the constraints that we have in the community, because there's been a lot of dialogue that says, well, you really don't need to do any building because the kids can all fit. Well, when you program the values of the district into it, there still are some needs. I did ask the principals earlier this year, what they thought about fencing in the middle school. I didn't mean fences going around the middle school. I meant the swords, epées, I guess. Really, and I wasn't kidding, in a way to say, are there ways in small areas that we can get kids more involved in those kinds of things? So that is a legitimate concern.
Do you use Kinwood at all for after-school sports?
We do not.
Is that something that could be considered?
I'm sure it's something that we could look into in terms of their space. I don't know how much their space is used in terms of after school.
I can just comment, MELC is in there, so there's use of the gym by the after-school program, but, maybe you can cut a deal with Dr. Martino, I don't know. But, and the field is technically considered BC.
It is technically BC,
Yeah.
but it's shared.
So everything else is basically blacktop in front and on the side.
Any other comments? All right, Welsh Valley, Mr. Hall, you're up.
Welsh Valley now has about 3.5 minutes because Mr. Cotton.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start off by thanking this board for its tremendous level of support that's been provided to us over the course of the past several years. As many of you know, Welsh Valley was fortunate enough in 2015, in September of 2015, to open the doors to 12 additional classrooms that were created as a result of similar discussions to what we're having tonight relative to Bala Cynwyd Middle School. Welsh Valley Middle School is a really beautiful campus, a really quaint campus, for those of you that haven't visited. Many of you know that Welsh Valley Middle School is a California-style campus in the Northeast. And so really quaint. And so, while you might imagine that, most of our challenges would relate to weather with a California-style campus in the Northeast, that's actually not the case. You'd be surprised how many 6th, 7th, and 8th graders wear shorts in 20-degree weather, seemingly, unaffected by it. Really bizarre behavior. Welsh Valley is great. And so in a minute, what I will do is I will orient you to the campus, for those of you that haven't had an opportunity to visit. For some of you, this will be review. And any Seinfeld fans in the audience, Kramer fans, lots of levels at Welsh Valley. So we'll start at the lower level. The lower level, right here in this beige color, these are 7th grade classrooms in that beige color. And we have our water-bound interdisciplinary team at 7th grade. Their classrooms are right here, and they have that removable wall that Mr. Potton spoke about. And then we have 2 other science labs in this corridor as well. Right around the corner on this same level, these beige classrooms are part of a 7th grade team. Right now it's Team 7B, and then there's some special education classrooms that are in that corridor as well. Going to the next slide, this is level 2 of our campus, and I'll start in the same area. And so this is our A wing that I've been talking about. Our green classrooms are 8th grade classrooms, and so our POV classrooms are all in this corridor in the A link. We have another 8th grade team, that's our 8B team, that is in this corridor, right around the corner to the left, right around the corner to the right in the A wing. You see some more beige classrooms. That tells you that this is another 7th grade team, and that's our 7C team. This is exciting. This is the first level of our new 12 classroom edition, relatively new, September 2015. And we have the 7A team as well as some world language and special education classrooms on this level right here. Our gymnasium is through this wall right here. This is our gymnasium. We have one large group gymnasium, a really large space, and then upstairs above it, you'll see that in a minute, that's a smaller gymnasium. Moving over here, so I just want to orient you to, given that it's a California-style campus, there are actually 6 different buildings, and only some of them internally connect to one another. So students walk across this courtyard many times during the day. So this is our A wing that I've been talking about, the B wing going counterclockwise. This is the C wing. The D wing is here. The E wing is here. The F wing is here, continuing to go clockwise. And then the G wing is this new wing right here. On this side of the campus, in the E wing, this is the red color, this bright red color. This is a 6th grade team. It's our 6B team. Across the corridor is our library, right over here. Moving over here to our F wing, again, the gymnasium that I spoke about. So going to the upper level, and again, I'll start back at the A wing. Again, we go counterclockwise, A through G. In the B wing right here, we have our 3rd 8th grade team. That's Team 8A. Moving counterclockwise, this is our cafeteria, and I'll talk about that in a minute because the space in the cafeteria certainly isn't adequate enough to accommodate the increased enrollment that will move up, that will push up and top out in about 2021. I'll talk about that in a minute. Here's our auditorium right here. It seats about 730 students, and we have a student population of over 1,000. So for the past several years, we haven't been able to accommodate a full school assembly, and that certainly poses some challenges that we mitigate by having grade level assemblies. Behind the auditorium, there are 2 music rooms, and there's a music lab right here adjoining the cafeteria. That'll become important in a minute. And then here are our main office suites. These have been renovated as recently as 2015. Over here a sixth grade team, and then above it, remember I said there are lots of levels, there's another level, so there's a fourth level to the campus, and that's our other sixth grade team. In the E-Wing, we have 2 art classrooms, a computer classroom, and a world language classroom, in addition to special education and reading small group classrooms. And then over here, we have our wrestling room, which we converted just last year, because despite the fact that we've added 12 classrooms, we already are feeling some constraints due to space, and so we had to convert our wrestling room into a classroom, and that's to accommodate our challenge classes for gifted, because one of the consequences of our increased enrollment means that our challenge classes are a little bit larger than they had been. In the past, they fit in the small group instruction room, and they don't any longer. And then here's our second gymnasium. So, as I mentioned, in 2015, we opened 12 additional classrooms, so we're really fortunate to say that. However, as recently as this past school year, we've needed to, as I mentioned, convert the wrestling room into a challenge classroom, and we also needed to convert one of our large group instruction rooms into a small group instructional room. I'll show you where that is, and that is right here. It's E101. This was a large group instruction room that we converted into 2 small group instructional rooms because of a need to do that. Going forward, as I alluded to, we have some concerns about cafeteria space. So while the fire marshal would certainly tell us that we have seating capacity for 420 students, with what we know about middle school students and the challenge of keeping them safe when they're in a large group like that, operating at full capacity in a large group instructional space, despite the number of, cafeteria recess aids that you might have there, it just poses some considerable challenges. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't think about how we could provide them with a little bit more elbow room so that they'll be set up to make really healthy choices and to be kind to one another, and not be sitting on top of one another, which poses some inevitable challenges. So our proposal for that would be to expand the cafeteria serving area and also the seating area, which would allow everyone to flow through that more comfortably. And that would require us to relocate our music lab. So remember, in orange, this is our cafeteria. Adjoining it is our music lab, which has some computer stations. We have a plan that would call for us to relocate that music lab so that we could push through this wall and expand the size of the cafeteria seating area. We could relocate that music lab to what's currently used as our choral music room, and then we could relocate the choral music classes to a large group instructional space in the E-Wing, and that's currently E213. And some of you that have been to our campus are familiar with that one large group instructional space. As Mr. Ponton mentioned, teaming is a core feature of our program. It's not just the case that we believe in it. Research has substantiated the fact that over and over again, the fact that it's the ideal way really to make sure that we're able to program optimally for adolescent students, to make sure that there's a core group of adults that get to know their needs academically, socially, and emotionally, and that they feel connected to school, and they have a small school experience in what has now become a large school with over 1,000 students. And so most of our challenges revolve around, as we experience the increasing enrollment, our challenges revolve around how to keep teams centrally located to essentially minimize the amount of long trips students need to make in between classes. So we try to keep their 4 core classes in the same corridor, as I mentioned, and we've been really fortunate to have the support of the board over the course of the past several years to allow us to continue to do that. And not only does that, allow the staff to communicate informally multiple times a day in addition to the formal common planning time they have, but it also allows them to informally touch base with one another quite a lot, and it minimizes the amount of travel that students need to make during that unstructured time. This is just a summary slide that speaks to what I addressed in some more detail in the previous slides about the fact that we've done a thorough analysis of essentially all the core spaces and the specialized program spaces, and we feel confident that at Welsh Valley, but for the fact that we have some needs in that cafeteria, serving, and seating area, we feel really confident that we can meet the challenges that will be facing us with the increased enrollment. Turn over to Mr. Gannan.
Thank you, Chris. This slide recaps the history in terms of enrollment and then also the projections going forward. The highest projected enrollment is shown to occur in the same year as the highest projected enrollment for Bala-Cynwyd, and that's in 21-22. I'm going to show you now the capacity table, just like the one from Bala-Cynwyd. There are more rooms here, so the capacity comes up a bit higher. When you apply the 85% utilization factor, we have an optimum classroom capacity of 1,071 students. If we compare that to our highest projected enrollment of 1,200 students, we do come up short. However, the principal and his staff have worked on plans that they believe they can survive without having to add any additional building space. And part of that would be through conversion of what is now a computer lab, et cetera. And I'm sure he can talk to you more about that. Once we reach past the peak, the average going out from 22 to 27, which is the end of the projection period, we see an average of much less than our highest projected enrollment. So once again, we think we'd be able to survive that without additional construction. This is a aerial view of the site. This shows the site under construction, as Mr. Hall has pointed out. Construction is completed, but I'll just orient you to the site here a bit. This is Hagey's Ford Road that comes and wraps around the campus. This is Tower Lane. This property along here was the former St. Justin Church property that we were able to acquire. What is currently on this property, the former church building is still there, but we have a playing field right here where the priest rectory used to be, and this has been leveled out and create a playing field. Our new wing, the G building, has been added between these two buildings, and of course we had temporary classrooms on site for 2 years, and those have been removed. We should probably talk about the ever exciting topic of arrival and dismissal.
Absolutely.
You want to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
So for as recently as 2 years ago, all of the parent drop-off and pickup has taken place on Tower Lane and on Hagey's Ford Road, which has not been incredibly safe. And so 2 years ago, we developed and communicated to families a new plan that allowed us to use this area here, essentially this driveway around the site of the former St. Justin's Church. So parents pull in off Tower Lane, they pull in to this driveway and parking lot, they circle, they drive this loop right here, they drop off here, and we've constructed a stairway that allows students to safely navigate this hill, and they walk up to campus, and then parents pull out. We get, actually, at pickup and drop off, as many as 50 cars off of the street on Tower Lane and on Hagey's Ford Road. We've counted it multiple times. We get 50 cars in here when we fill up double file dropping off. And in the afternoon, in the morning it's staggered. The drop off is staggered, as you could imagine. But in the afternoon, we have 50 cars sitting in the parking lot waiting at 3:05 to pick up their middle schoolers. So it is certainly an improvement, and that's a heck of a lot of traffic that's not on Tower Lane on Hagey's Ford Road. Not to mention the fact that we don't have students getting dropped off on one side of the road and crossing it, which certainly isn't safe.
There are two loops that the buses use. In the morning, they use this main loop where they come off Tower Lane and turn left. This is the dedicated bus loop. In the afternoon, they also use the loop out here by the gymnasium. So we have a good separation of the bus pickup drop-off from parent pickup drop-off. We have plenty of parking on site. So the acquisition of this property has turned out to really help us out in terms of safety of the site. This is a brief zoning summary of the site. Once we consolidate the parcel with the former church, we have just over 34 acres. It's a combination of R1, R2 zoning district, mostly R1. And allowable impervious surface is 27.25, as you see there. We are below that at this point, so we still have some impervious surface remaining should we have a reason to use that. Now let me talk about a comparison between the two middle schools of some of the core spaces. Let me explain to you how this table is laid out. The first line shows what the enrollment was last September, what we refer to as the 10th day enrollment. So at Bala Cynwyd, it was 915 students. At Welsh Valley, it was 1,018. The next line below that shows the highest projected enrollment for each one of the schools and the year in which it will occur. And again, it's 1175, Bala Cynwyd, 1,200, Welsh Valley, both in the same year. Below that, we're going to do some comparison of PE space, cafeteria space, and auditorium. And what we've done with PE is we have totaled up the PE space by adding the gymnasiums together, square foot wise. And then we've created a number, a calculated number that would allow you to compare the two schools. We took the highest projected enrollment and divided it into the total number of square foot for PE. So you've got a number that's 11 in the case of Bala Cynwyd and 8.9 in the case of Welsh Valley. It doesn't mean anything other than allow you to compare. And so the idea there is Welsh Valley has a little bit less PE space than Bala Cynwyd. Moving on to the cafeteria, we've talked about this. We did the same thing with square footage, but what we really want to look at is what's our student capacity for seating. Based on the building code straight interpretation of 15 square foot per student, you can see we have these numbers: 334 for Bala Cynwyd, 317 for Welsh Valley. That is not adequate for our highest projected enrollment. At middle school, they eat by grade, so it's important to be able to seat one grade at one time. We're going to need at least 420 spaces for our highest grades at each of the schools. And you can see the auditorium. Again, both schools are in a situation where they can't have a full school assembly, so they have to modify what they do and have more than one assembly for that program. So to continue on with the theme of the cafeterias, there's two aspects to the cafeterias, and we've gone over this in facility committee meetings several times. One is the throughput of the serving line, and that's important because there's only a certain amount of time set aside in the schedule for one whole grade to eat. So it's important for students to get through that line as quickly as possible. And so we have identified in each of the middle schools an upgrade to the serving lines that we believe will increase the throughput of the students and allow them to move faster. Part of it has to do with separating out some of the serving areas. Part of it has to do with adding additional point of sale positions and repositioning those so that there's more space for students to line up and be processed through the point of sale faster. The other one is the seating area. And so I've repeated here again in this line the numbers based on 15 square feet per student. We did go to the Township Building Code official and show them a revised layout based on different sized tables in some cases, or changing the separation between tables. And they did approve, and the building code allows them to do this, up to these numbers that you see here, 416, 420, which pretty much gets us where we need to go for highest projected enrollment. But again, it's crowded, and it's not conducive to all the middle school students being on their best behavior all the time. So in the case of Welsh Valley, let me talk about that first. Mr. Hall described how we could relocate a music lab that's located adjacent to the cafeteria. We could expand into that space, and we think that would give us as much as 466 seating for 466 in a more comfortable setting. And then over at Bala Cynwyd, we think that we can expand the seating area as part of a project that we may do to add permanent classrooms. From a construction point of view, doing the serving line modifications is different than adding on to the building. It's interior work. So right now, we've talked to the facility committee chair, and we'll be bringing a recommendation for those projects to renovate the serving lines in both middle schools and to change the seating area at Welsh Valley. We'll be bringing that in the fall for approval to be done next summer. And then, of course, expansion of Bala Cynwyd's seating area would depend on what other major construction goes on there, because construction-wise, it makes sense to keep those grouped together.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. I'd just like to touch on three quick concepts. The first one, and I think you can see it here, is, and I think school boards and administrators deal with this constantly, is the concept of overbuilding. You don't want to expend funds to overbuild. At the same time, I recommend making sure that your building is adequately built, and that may mean building for more space than your highest projected enrollment may necessarily encompass. And I'll talk more about that as we get into the high school. But as you can see, the Welsh Valley facility has just been increased, and we're already making modifications within the building to handle increased students. So it's just something that I think we have to wrestle with, even though I know there's been a lot of debate. Another thing that's been debated, and I've seen in some comments, community comments folks have made, is, well, could you redistrict students from Bala Cynwyd Middle School into Welsh Valley? Well, if you remember, the highest projected enrollment for Bala Cynwyd is 1,175. So if you get back to where we are now, you'd have to lose, what, 175 or 180 students at minimum. You'd probably need to lose more than that, probably around 200 to 250. If you move that number of students to Welsh Valley, you're talking about at least a 1,400 pupil elementary school at Welsh Valley. Did I say that wrong? Oh, for Pete's sakes, you know what. So if you were to move that number of students into Welsh Valley Middle School, you compound all of the issues that Mr. Hall has said. And in fact, the way that we would want to increase the cafeteria wouldn't work, because that bump out wouldn't give you the adequate space that you'd need. So I just mentioned that. I also forgot to mention that at Bala Cynwyd Middle School, the track is not a regulation size track. So as I understand it, when we have a track meet, they have to come over to Welsh Valley to make it adequate. The last thing that I'd say about our middle schools before I hand it back to the board is they're close together, proximity-wise. That may make that situation nice in terms of the track, but theoretically you'd like to have it spread apart a little bit more to make adequate use of redistricting and zoning and so forth and so on. So the closeness also compounds the issue of any sort of redistricting. So with that.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll open it up to board questions right now. If you're interested in providing public comment on the Welsh Valley presentation, as the board is asking their questions, if you could please sign up with Mr. Orlando at this time. I'll start at my left this time. Questions? Mr. Fetterman?
Just a short one. Thanks for the presentation. Sounds like Welsh Valley is in good hands. One question about Welsh Valley, in terms of the walkers, do they, with the new construction that closed the gap in the school, can kids in the morning and the afternoon leave at both sides, or they all have to come in the front door?
They can, yeah. So there are exit points on the Hagies-Ford side of campus and on the Tower Lane side of campus, right? So they can go either way.
Okay.
And arrive either way.
Is there some drop off up on the Hagies-Ford side?
There is not. Yeah, we direct everyone to pick up and drop off at this site right here at the junction of Tower Lane and Hagies-Ford Road. Okay. Drivers, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Please.
Oh, what's your current enrollment right now?
1,015. Yeah.
I just wanted to say maybe kudos to both you and Pat, because I know
Mostly Pat.
Welsh
Mostly that.
Valley is a very well-used facility by all the sports teams inside and out, whereas the other schools have much more constrained or not as many fields. So we thank you for that, because that's a really important asset for, you know, soccer, basketball, baseball, everything going on there. So for those of us who don't send kids to the school, we're still there a lot, and it's a very nice facility.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice to hear and to be able to see the way in which the addition is utilized. There was a lot of debate. In fact, the initial recommendation was to build 16 classrooms, not 12, and you know, that didn't happen. And I think that's a real cautionary tale here because, you know, having a few extra classrooms, well, obviously it does increase the expense. It's a lot less expensive to do it at once than it is to look into adding. And I'm glad we don't need to do that at this point, but I do think that it's important as we're discussing what to do at Ballackinwood Middle School that we keep that in mind and that we make sure that we have enough, that we really do have enough space and we have a little bit of breathing room as well, so.
Agree, yeah.
Questions? Mr. Driscoll?
No. I want, because, I'm kidding. Well, I want to talk about this picture because, yes, it is 34 acres, but it's tricky because my understanding is if you go to where the red box is, to the right of that is undevelopable. It's a very steep slope, where the marker is. So while it is 5 or 6 acres of land, we can't do anything with it. I think we've kind of run out of space going in that direction. If you go above the campus, where the modulars are, maybe there's space there, but you also notice that there's a baseball diamond. If you go a little further out.
Right. So
My understanding is Ballackinwood does not have a baseball diamond on campus. So if you build too much in that direction where those modulars are, you run the risk of... I'm sorry, used to be, I apologize.
Right here, yeah.
Where they are on the picture.
Key distinction. Yeah.
With the
Key
big
distinction.
eyes. If you go up towards the top of the picture where the track is, there's also a soccer field to the right of that track. So to Lori's point, there's a lot of fields that can be used. If we're not careful and we were to cheat space there, we could lose a field there, which would be very bad. Lastly, parking is a problem there. I mean, we have good parking on campus. There's no parking on Haggis Ford Road.
No.
I don't believe there's parking on Tower Lane. I don't remember if that's true or not. I can't remember. It's been a while since
It's a really narrow road. It's very limited. It's a really narrow road. Yeah.
You are talking about trying to get people across, Haggis Ford Road, which is not an ideal situation. And lastly, if I don't mention it, there is a sidewalk that goes around Haggis Ford Road.
That's true.
And there's a sidewalk that goes up Tower Lane. And I don't believe there's another sidewalk for about a quarter mile till you hit Penn Valley.
This is true.
So while students do dismiss and they do walk, and I've seen them, they don't have a sidewalk once they leave the intersection of Tower and Haggis Ford Road.
That's correct, yeah.
And you see them walking, in the green verge next to...
Bridge 23, yeah, crossing Route 23.
I argue, you've heard me say this 1,000 times, the school district did its part. When is the township going to complete the network and give our kids a better place to walk?
So no question there, Mr. Driscoll?
My questions were all confirmation of how that, I think people don't know what that site looks like unless you've been there multiple times.
Okay, thank you. Dr. O'Leary?
So it always fascinates me to listen to middle school principals because what I think of as a nightmare, they look at as a challenge or even better as an opportunity. So in that spirit, I think we have 2 opportunities at the middle school. One is I think that at all the schools, we've heard a lot about pickups and drop-offs and traffic. And I'm not quite sure culturally why that needs to be when we provide buses or kids should be walking. So I think there perhaps needs to be some sort of marketing effort on, take the bus. it would alleviate a lot of neighborhood problems, and it's better for the environment, and we're paying for it anyway. So I think perhaps we need to look at the parent culture, the bus culture, something, and try and encourage kids to take the bus. The second opportunity I see is I think we need there are a lot more students in middle school, and I think we need a lot more extracurricular opportunities. I know that we're starting to have to cut from some of the teams, and as a kid, expects to play a sport or have some activity, and then they're not doing it suddenly, that creates a gap, which is sort of critical of the middle school schedule. So I would encourage everybody to think about more opportunities, and they don't necessarily have to be sports, but just something to keep the kids engaged after school. Thank you.
Absolutely, sure.
No question, I just have statements.
Just opportunities.
That's right. Any more questions to my right? All right, I think I have a question. It may be a comment as well, an embedded comment. We're all guilty of that at some point. So I talked with Mr. Potton about adequate versus ideal. We've heard clearly about the issues regarding cafeteria space. Can you speak to some of the academic challenges that might present themselves given the increased enrollment, despite the 12 classroom addition, in terms of adequate versus ideal that you've noticed?
We still have a small subset of teachers that share classrooms, and the challenges that poses for a California-style campus are really unique. So, for a teacher to share a classroom at Welsh Valley means that quite often students are arriving to the class before the teacher might arrive to the class. When you think about the fact that teachers need to travel in between classrooms. So at the middle school level, and on a California-style campus, that's not ideal. But
besides that, you don't
we
see
don't have too
anything?
many cases of that, thanks to the fact that we've added the 12 classrooms. Without those, we would have upwards of 20 teachers in that position, and we're in a much better spot as a result of the board support. So.
Great.
We're in a good place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll move to public comment. Mr. Orlando?
Mike Leibowitz?
Oh, and thank you for the presentation, if I didn't say it already.
Thank you very much. I had a very specific question, or a few questions about the St. Justin's site specifically. My name is Mike Leibowitz. I live in Marion Station. I'm the president of the Marion Park Civic Association. A portion of the students in the Marion Park Civic Association go to Welsh Valley. A portion of them go to Balcombe Middle School. My specific questions are about the St. Justin's site, and specifically the comparison of the total Welsh Valley site versus the total Balcombe and Kimwood Elementary site. We heard earlier that this is a 34-acre campus. The Kimwood site, excluding Amherst Field, is 14 acres. Even with Amherst Field, I don't believe we get to 14 acres. I don't know if Pat has the exact acreage of Amherst. It's rough, so it's about the same size. So I guess my question is, has there been any discussion of what it would mean to the middle school if a small elementary school was built on the St. Justin site? And specifically, if you add them together. So in fact, they are smaller. Got it. So in fact, the entire Balcombe Middle School and Kimwood School campus is 20 acres. The entire Welsh Valley campus is 34 acres. Am I understanding you correctly? So my question is, has there been any discussion of what it would mean if we, in essence, created the same scenario that we have at Kimwood, by the way, with an extra 14 acres, dropping a 550 to 600 student school either on the St. Justin site or elsewhere on the Welsh Valley site. And related to that, I also wondered if we have any plans to use the St. Justin's church building, which continues to be there, whether it is occupiable for any district purposes whatsoever. So I don't know if all those answers will be flushed out today, but I'd be very curious to know if the board has considered those items.
I need to better understand, Mr. Leibowitz, your question. In other words, if we built an elementary school that students could move directly from that elementary school to Welsh Valley.
In essence, yes. If we said, look, the district, one of the ways to solve our space problems might be to build another elementary school, and the St. Justin site was purchased partially with that at least as an option, in time.
We have looked at that as an elementary school. The total site would hold about 550 students maximum. In order to relieve the impact on the other elementary schools, it would require what we call cascade redistricting. So, for example, students would leave Penn Wynne Elementary School, go to Marion, then kids from Marion would leave there and go to the other school. You could,
right, because of the geographic location.
Because of the geographic location. So the geographic location is a trial. In terms of using the St. Justin's, the actual existing building, I think we've pretty much determined that in order to use it for any kind of school use, it would have to be raised and built. We really couldn't make use of it. That's my recollection.
Right. We extensively studied it back in 2013, 2012. We were looking at how to add on to Welsh Valley Middle School, and there was no good way to try to incorporate it into the middle school that did not cost much more than what we ended up doing.
What you and I'm sure you know from this, there's quite a rise,
right,
in distance, and that presents another site issue.
Do you know how large that building is?
It's.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as a
it's not terribly
large. Mike, I will tell you this:
yeah.
it requires a lot of renovation to bring it up to code. The HVAC system would need to be replaced and is not accessible at all. Right. We need to have elevator and extensive restroom
I hope that as the board
renovations.
continues to work on our space issues, that they will consider the prospect of doing what we have at the Kinwood site, which is an elementary school and a middle school on the same campus. I don't think it would negatively impact Welch Valley. I understand that redistricting is always a challenge, but I think we're going to have to do that eventually anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can just follow up also that when we put the survey out, one of the options was, the issue of building another elementary school. Another one of the options was a kindergarten center at that site. And, those are still, I think, talkable kinds of options. One of the I know I sound like, he's always talking about challenges and he doesn't want to do it, but there are challenges. And one of the challenges with a kindergarten site is it doesn't remove enough classrooms in some of the elementary schools that would that it needs to. So it would still require in some of the elementary schools some building because we have half-day kindergarten. And the second thing is it would remove some kindergarten from elementary schools that in fact don't necessarily need to have it done. The biggest problem is it would probably require a fourth tier of transportation to make that work. So there are some challenges with that. What I would really encourage the community to do is take a good hard look at that survey and really give us some feedback. We've gotten a number of people who have responded so far, but it's up there, and those options are there and available for people to delve into.
Cheryl Masterman.
Hello, Cheryl Masterman from Villanova and HSA co-vice president at Welsh Valley. So as I'm looking at this has never occurred to me, and we've been talking a lot, I know, about this church building over the years. But since you mentioned earlier, this is almost the opposite of what Mr. Leibowitz is suggesting, that this facility is getting used by Bala Cynwyd now too for fields. It made me realize when I was in high school, our school was the district field, so everyone came to our field. And now that you're saying that this building isn't really useful, if we're going to raise it, could we make another sports field so that this becomes a district center field facility? So.
Pat, have you looked at the possibility? How much space is actually there for a field?
Well, I don't think there would be enough. First of all, we need to preserve a lot of the parking that you see there right now. The field that we were able to build that I roughly outlined in the red rectangle is a great field for practice, but it's not regulation size because we couldn't get it wide enough. So again, we would end up with a field that would be useful for practice, maybe useful for t-ball, but not practical for anything beyond that. The other thing is there is a grade difference over the far side of that church as you look at it is uphill from the near side of that church. So there's some grading that would have to be done.
So my question was so short, I'm coming back. So what if you put the parking towards Tower Lane and made the field that you already made bigger? Because you'll lose the building, so you can, it's not wide enough? Okay. Well, then my other question had been, and someone else just raised it too, was if you're going to raise that building, if you built another building, could you put a gymnasium there or an enclosed building so that you have more bad weather type of activities? Because another concern I do have in all of the districts is that the sixth graders, when we mentioned, I think you mentioned it earlier, there's not a lot of intramural opportunities for sixth graders at all. So maybe you could make another building with that.
So I think that's a possibility. The challenger again. The real challenge there is the grading. So in terms of ADA, you'd have to make sure that students in wheelchairs and so forth could do that. One of the things that I learned early on in my career as a school administrator is be careful when you say the words to an architect, could you build? And they always say yes, and their eyes light up because they want to, build.
Please.
Pat, where's the loading dock for Welsh Valley?
I'm going to use my little pointer here. It's right here. As part of the last renovation completed 2 years ago, we did an addition on the back of that kitchen. We actually built a loading dock and put a big freezer and a big refrigerator on it. So it stayed in the same place, but we upgraded it, so to speak. So it's right here.
But that makes it tricky to connect that part of the campus with something on St. Justin's, because that driveway needs to be there for the current loading dock. So
yes, we looked at various options for this several years ago, and we couldn't come up with anything that was as good as what we ended up with.
Mrs. Finger?
Hi, I'm Deborah Finger from Penn Valley, and I think in my head I've already come up with the reasons why my question is not going to be a good idea, but I am wondering, one, how often are there things that are happening in the auditorium? Like, how often is the auditorium used so that could the auditorium be repurposed into something else and the church, the former church, be repurposed into an auditorium? So that way you've gained however many, whatever you can do in the auditorium space. That could be potentially cafeteria space and classrooms. And because maybe there are not as many assemblies and all school programs that happen in the auditorium, it's an underutilized space that potentially could just be moved to the building on the corner.
And why is it you think that might not be a good idea?
One of the reasons would be the weather. Now, I work in a school where all of our all-school assemblies happen at another portion of the campus 2 blocks away. We in the lower school are always the ones that are walking, which is really not a big deal most of the time, and we will even walk when it's like a light sprinkle. We do utilize vans, but we do it, and it still works.
We actually had some conversations about whether it's a performing arts center or whether it's maybe a dance studio and a number of things like that. And I think those things are all possibilities. We fall back to the how do you get students over there? There is the ADA compliance issue, but I think those are all legitimate issues.
Mm-hmm. I'd be just interested to hear how often the auditorium is used. I think was the first part of the question.
So as I mentioned, the auditorium's never used for whole school assemblies because we haven't been able to fit for such assemblies in years. But we use it a couple times a month for different types of assemblies, and more times than that certainly for rehearsals, for the orchestra and for the band. I think if we ever reach the point where we needed additional classroom space, we're not at that point yet, but if we ever reach that point, it might make sense to think about that part of the campus for an addition, but certainly of classrooms. But certainly we've talked about the challenges of students accessing the site of the former St. Justin's Church, just given the grade, given the fact that deliveries are coming along this driveway and going to the loading dock. And I believe that's been explored in years past, though. Yeah.
Jillian Johnson.
Hello, my name is Jillian Johnson, and I live in Bryn Mawr. My daughter will start at Welsh Valley in the fall. I've only been there once, so this question might be ignorant. But following up on the last one about using this space, this recently or obviously purchased after the fact space, I wonder what happens if you use this courtyard space. I'm a little curious about the concept of a California concept school in the Northeast to start with, but I wonder if you can build an auditorium in the middle, use the auditorium space, maybe convert that to the cafeteria, or something else, convert the current cafeteria into classroom space, but if that helps alleviate, and then if that also provides an opportunity, it's not ideal, I think, for middle school to be 1,000 students, and probably not ideal to make it even bigger, but if that enables, if that's a more logical expansion than what you're considering at Ballackinwood, which is a smaller site to begin with.
Well, as I indicated, there's almost no end to what we could do in terms of cost and everything. I think it would be a trade-off. Moving, if we were to, in essence, abandon the current schema of Welsh Valley and make it a fully interior school, we could do that. I think, again, we would have to decide, is that a better alternative than the current feeder patterns which are going into Ballackinwood remaining there? Is that a better concept than what we have to do at Welsh Valley? Let me hasten to add that there was accommodation made at Welsh Valley for additional classrooms if necessary. Some of the classrooms that were recently built don't have a second floor. And it was constructed or designed in a way, Mr. Gannon, correct, that other classrooms could be built on there cheaper than some of the other designs. But and so we do have that. Do you want us to move on to? Okay. Thank you. That was the longest 3.5 minutes I think I've seen, Mr. Hall. But I think it was important that we had the opportunity to hear. Now we're going to move into the high school situation. And let me just get my notes up here. The first presentation, I lost my notes. The first of the high school presentations is Lower Merion. And since the schools were built to be very similar, I do think we should really do some in-depth work looking at Lower Merion and then looking at Harrod. I will say that as we go through this, it's going to be really important to take a look at again, the program that we offer and the choices that students have as a high priority. So with that, Mr. Hughes.
Hi, thank you very much. I think what did you say, a situation? There's no situation. Everything's fine.
I make the jokes.
First off, boy, we'll be in trouble tonight. First off, happy Wednesday, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to present and do this. So let me talk a little bit about Lower Merion High School. I I've asked Scott Kilpatrick, one of the assistant principals, to join me tonight. Scott is our scheduler for the last 9 years. He has over 16 years of building master schedules for high schools for 2 districts, Lower Merion being the latter. And what he does is amazing. High school schedule is one of the most complex components of going to high school. And I've asked Scott to kind of share some things once we get to that. So first, let me give you an idea of what we use currently with the building. I would thank the previous board and the current board for allowing us this high school. It's a beautiful building with so many aspects and so many things we can do, and I really do appreciate that. I'd like to also thank anybody who was still around from the original planning design, which would be me, for all the hard work into coming up with this group from the 2005. Sorry, boss, you know he's going to keep going here. So if you take a look currently where we are, within our current use of the building, the ground level area right here. When we designed the building, the objective was to keep the front part, more of the academic part, the facility part in the back, for usage of all of our sports and all our programs. Remember, high schools are built around the programs that we offer, and that's what we want to make sure we're offering for all of our students and continuing. So the back of the building is built mostly for our activities, co-curricular activities, and things that go on. If you notice, the main gym is right there. We have the auxiliary gym behind it. They're used at every set during the day. The back area is the pool, which is used by our swimming and lifeguarding classes during the day. And then it is also used during the day in the early morning hours by the community, and it is used in portion of the day when we try to fit it in a middle of the day by the community also for open swims. And then the pool is almost used every single night once you get into roughly the winter seasons, all the way up into the spring part to there. The building over here in the cafeteria. The cafeteria right now, if we look at the enrollment growth, the cafeteria, we would be, as the enrollment grows, we would be out of compliance in terms of the cafeteria usage. But with the famous design from the Dr. Eveslog years called the Lunch and Learn, and we named it after him in case it didn't go well either, has worked very well and has allowed our flexibility during lunch and learn so that we don't have to confine everybody to the cafeteria at the same time. We use the entire building during lunch and learn. What will have to be looked at in years to come, though, is the actual serving areas would have to be enlarged at some point just to get the access of the amount of students that would go through there. The flow is great down here. Do we use any classroom space? We do. We have some classrooms on the bottom here. We have a health classroom that we use. We also use this for coaches and for after-school activities. That classroom is used almost every set of the day with the amount of health sections we run for sophomores. The far wall here, we have weight rooms, offices space, locker rooms, access to the outdoors so our sporting teams can be picked up on this side of the building. The rest of this area here is all of our athletic facilities in terms of coaches' rooms, athletic office, secretary's office. Bottom front up here is where we use the atrium, lower atrium, so that's one of our areas that students may gather if they don't have a set or a class during the day. It's also an area we use after school for meetings. Up here, this is the bottom part of the wing area. That is basically offices and an aerobic room. The offices are basically extra offices from where the guidance suite is, so they are all staffed. All right. We come upstairs now to the first floor area. This is our art wing in the back, which overlooks the main gym. There are some windows up in the upper atrium, so you can look and see what's happening. Again, a great design. Thank you. The art wing, those classes are used at this point. They are used for all of the art classes that we offer from 9th through 12th. We have used them for other courses if needed, depending if we are overloaded on an area of an English class or a social studies class, but mostly right now we're running all of the art programs out here. The auditorium is right here. This whole wing, as you enter the building, the far right there, to my right, is all of our office spaces, from the administrative offices all the way to the nursing suite and the guidance counselor offices on this. The building revolves around the courtyard, the L-shaped part of the courtyard. This is where all the classroom space is. When you see the areas that are colored up there in the gray and in the shades of blue, you're all of your classrooms from, we try to do them by programs. Most of that you'll see on the first floor right there are some special education rooms, all of the world language rooms. On the outside wall, you're looking at the family consumer science classrooms and our technology classrooms. And the reason they were built on the outside is because on top of them, we build the science classrooms. It's easier for flow for all of the water needed, gas lines and everything else, so that they're on top of one another there. You see the rest of the classrooms in the back, again, all utilize space, a variety of courses or programs. Again, most of this, as I stated, is world language, all right, for on the first floor as you use that. At this point, with enrollment growth, we're just increasing the number of classroom spaces that we are using. When you go up to the second floor, the L shape on this part right here is math, and here is all of our other math classrooms. We also have a room for where we run out of our program for the one-to-one technology. We also have an area where we call Learning Center, which is where enrichment occurs, and then the front part is the library. We use the library, many aspects used, it's open all day. It's probably one of the most highly traveled places. It's set up as a collaborative space, so there still are books in there, but there's also the way we've set it up is you can combine areas for small group learning, where you can have clear glass areas that can partition off. So if kids want to work on projects and not hear from other people around there, we were able to do that. So we've done that over the last couple of years as we've noticed the growth in the building. The outside rooms, and this is kind of what we'll talk about, what Scott's going to talk about in a little bit. These are your science rooms. Science, particularly to run a biology, the three main courses science has that you need that we run are most of our lab sciences, which are biology, chemistry, and then physics. Biology and chemistry need to have gas and water running to them. Physics has a different setup. The outsides here, those are physics classrooms. The two here are the biology classrooms and chemistry classrooms. There are 8 of those in the building, and that's where you're going to see where the issues come as the enrollment grows at Lower Merion High School. I'll go back to one thing I was thinking, the auditorium. We already now are over, we cannot do an all-school assembly in the auditorium, and actually we haven't since we were able to first move in the building. So we, right now, with the enrollment, we do 2 assemblies. We'll do a 9 and 10 together, and we'll do 11 and 12. Eventually, as we get larger, it'll be a single set grade level assembly, which is not a big deal in the high school. Third floor, all classroom space again. All right. Each one is different programs. You see in the yellow is used for DPCs, called Department Planning Centers. They're areas we do run off the PLC process, so they are areas where teachers, if they're not in class, they can have meetings in those rooms within their certain contents. On the outskirts, you see is the science classrooms again. These are all biology/chemistry, so they run with gas and water to them. And that's the current usage of where we are. We have not, at this point, had to move any classrooms into and make any altercations with the enrollment. We might have moved certain things around. Not every teacher in the high school, which we were used to from the old building, till not every teacher has their own classroom. We do share classrooms currently. We have about 8 teachers to 9 teachers that do share classrooms, whether on the first, second, or third floor. We try to work out that their schedule, that they're close enough if they have to go to another classroom, that it's either across and hall. And that's good because of the programming. If you're looking for all social studies, the third floor is social studies English. So we make that the maneuvering there for the teachers is hopefully easy enough that within the 5 minutes you have, you can move from those areas. What's our biggest concern? Well, it's the 8 classrooms of biology and chemistry. And we're going to show you some numbers tonight that'll kind of, get the idea of where the trends are going from in those courses and in the science field overall that has led us to look of use outside the building, which has led us to request and using here the DAO for building space as we get larger. All right. Currently, this is the DAO. This is the current building. Below is the main gym called the Downs Gym. The Downs Gym is used as our auxiliary gym. It is used for our PE classes besides the main gym. Here's the floor plan of the classrooms up on the third floor. We have 5 renovated science classrooms. 4 are in use starting this year. 2 of them are biology/chemistry rooms. The other 2 are used for chemistry at the moment, but they are universal, meaning that you could teach anything in there. We made them universal for physics or any of the other courses.
John, let me just say for somebody looking in later, the DAO is the District Administration Building.
Sure.
That's this
building.
building
You're in. Currently, we use all 4 of these for chemistry right now. Starting this September 2016, we began the process of moving students over here. So they're 10th grade students in these classes and 11th and 12th grade if they're taking AP chemistry. All right. Core spaces, the cafeterias, the serving areas, which I just talked about. The adequacy mostly will be within the serving area. If we continue with the lunch and learn, that allows the flexibility that not all the students are in the cafeteria at the same time. And feedback on that is it's a really well-liked program. The gymnasium and the library, are they adequate? Yes, I mean, spaces definitely get an issue as you increase the numbers, but currently they're fine for where we are. And our usage of the gym, we have the auxiliary gym over here if we have to add more classes. Art and music are adequate. Family, consumer science, and technology right now, same thing. They're adequate for what our needs are for the course requests. All right. Specialized and special education and our speech and psychology, all of those rooms. We have increased certain special education rooms, but we've had the availability to do that using the current building and the current setup and the dynamics of the building. And the administrative space is totally fine at this point. This is our peak enrollment, 2024 to 2025, 1880. We are currently at 14, I think it's 34. So we will be moving up, projected that time by 2024. So we're going to show you some slides in 2021 and then also in 2024 and 25, which deals with the science in the area. So as I said right here, what's a biology, chemistry? Why is it so, it's set up as the biology and chemistry is set up and established so that there's water and gas in there and you can run the lab sciences, which are very important to our students, and I'll show you that data in a second. The classrooms, the 2 on the second floor to biology and lab, they are all stationed they have tables, 6 table labs, 4 seats to a table, so those classrooms fit 24 student seats in there. You see the physics on the other side. They do have lab stations. You can fit a little bit larger than 24 students in the physics labs. You don't need gas and water to run those courses. Third floor, same thing. These are all biology/chemistry rooms. Right now, they are being used as all biology classrooms at the moment for freshman courses and for our AP courses. All is set up the same exact way. 6 lab stations, 4 seats, 24 kids to a classroom. As I said, what's the biology and classroom available space? Each classroom is available for, if you look at it, our schedule is 6 sets or periods per day. We run a 4-day cycle. So that allows 48 teaching periods available each and every day. If you look at those science labs, it's 8 classrooms times the 6 periods. So if we look at our teaching, we have 192 teaching periods available during a 4-day cycle. So 48 periods within the 4-day cycle. So I'm going to ask Scott to kind of show you how this all lays out when we go to plan how the schedule works, and we go to look at specifically what we're going to look at and show you is the science and biology classrooms and the trends that are happening in those courses.
So this just shows what Mr. Hughes was talking about, that on any given day, these rooms are available 6 times through the schedule. So the next part of the agenda we're going to talk about what does a biology and chemistry teacher assignment look like. So this would be a normal science classroom throughout the 4-day cycle where a biology or chemistry teacher could teach these types of courses. So we'll start with the rose one, the biology color. That's taught every day at Lower Merion High School, so you don't have a skip day. So throughout the 4-day cycle in a biology classroom, that teacher's going to need 4 times. The next one is chemistry, which is the gold, is taught the same way, where it's going to need to be taught on an A day, B day, C day, and a D day. And then the next course could be anatomy and physiology. Here it's different in the fact there is a skip day, because anatomy physiology you have 1 day's, B day's 1, and then you have a lab on C day, which means it meets for 110 minutes versus the normal 55 minutes, and then D day it meets once. And then if you have an AP, if you teach an AP biochemistry, environmental science course, then that meets the same way, where you teach it on A day, skip on a B day, teach it on a C day, and then D day would be your 110-minute lab.
So the idea by showing you this concept is just the fact that when you go to schedule this and your room utilization in terms of the sciences, which is a real area, we have the issue that we will have as enrollment grows. When the class goes across the 4 days, it's a lot easier. When it's doubled up, you're losing classroom space then to maneuver anything in there. So when courses such as the AP courses, you have to go back to back. So you lose a second set within that classroom, which becomes difficult in the scheduling process.
Let me just back up here too. So in this science classroom, you could have 8 times that you could bring another biology or chemistry teacher in. So that would be 2 classes you could bring in. The courses that we currently offer at Lower Merion High School, the ones in blue are taught by our biology chemistry teachers, but they could be taught in other instructional spaces throughout the building. The ones in red are the courses that need the biology and science classroom. And then the ones in black are taught by physics teachers. We do have one class we offer on a Saturday morning, which is organic chemistry, and that is offered by both high schools, but it's taught in this building on the 3rd floor. Okay, now I'm going to talk about what my teaching section calculations for science look like in 2016 and 17 school year. In 2016-17, I have 12 full-time biology chemistry teachers that teach 4 classes, meeting 4 times a cycle, equals 16 periods per teacher. And I have 2 part-time biology chemistry teachers teaching 2 classes, meaning 4 times 1 equals 8 periods. 1 is a 0.5 teacher increase, and our department chair teaches 0.5 for science. So when you look at that, and you look at a teacher teaching 16 periods times 12 teachers, you need 192 class periods that I need to find a biology classroom for a teacher to teach within a 4-day cycle. So we needed, in 2016, we needed 208. If you add the 11916, you come to 208. So right there, we had no availability in our current building for 16 class periods that are being requested. That means 4 science classes would not have rooms, which in fact 96 students would not have access to a science course in 2016 and 17.
What Scott's going to do is this is really building the issue that we wanted to bring to the fore so everybody would understand. So this is sort of, if you were like, if you didn't care up until now, now's a good time to start.
Thank you, sir. So now I'm going to show the 2017 to 2018 with that 0.5 teacher increase. So now that we have 13 full-time biology chemistry teachers, but I'm not going to go on because I think you guys can start to see the pattern. The 0.5 teacher became a 1.0, that's less than 13, which means we only had 1 part-time, which is our department chair at 0.5. That means now in 2017 and 18, we needed a total of 216 periods needed. With the current use, without the DAO, I only had 192. That means 24 class periods were being requested above the 192. That means 6 science classrooms would not have had rooms. Now we're at 144 students that would not have access to the science classroom going into the next year. So now I want to talk a little bit about projected enrollment growth, and then I'm going to show you some increases with the student selection of courses from 2006 till now, and then we're going to talk a little about 2020 to our highest enrollment in 2024-25 at 1880. So this is just a graph to show you the projection of the enrollment with 2024, which is really just following the middle schools. And then talk a little bit about, I'm going to have Ms. Hughes talk a little bit about the curriculum impact on enrollment growth.
So every 9th grader coming in can take biology. 10th graders then will take chemistry. If you look at the increased enrollment, there'll be a need for additional biology and chemistry classrooms, hence the use of the DIO at this moment to meet the curricular needs for the incoming students. Most students go 9th grade, biology, 10th grade, chemistry. Junior year is physics, and then we'll show you in a second what's happening. You only need 3 years of science as one of our graduating requirements, but we're going to show you over the last 10-year trend what's happening within science and in other courses, but mostly it is science. A majority of our students are taking a 4-year language, they take 4-year math, and they're taking a 4th year of science. The requirement is 4 years of social studies by the state and 4 years of English. Those others are 3-year requirements. But we are seeing such an increase in percentage, specifically in the science field, that our students are going way above and beyond the requirements for those areas. Students in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we're noticing in the last, it's an increase from 10 years, but in the last 5 years, incredibly, our students are taking 2 or more sciences. And the way this is looking now, you can even graduate from Lower Merion High School within the future, where you could have 8 science courses under your belt if you were interested in that field. And the availability has become, since we've offered the science program back in, I can give you a little history, back in 2002 and 3, we were looking back on adding science courses because it was a big request from students and parents. We began the process of looking of adding courses beyond the AP chemistry, the AP biology, chemistry, physics. And in 2007, we added on about 6 or 5 new courses from physiology and anatomy to what was the other one? Genealogy and a couple others that have been anatomy that have just really grown over the years and have led to where we are right now. So just to give you an idea, I know it's hard to look at this chart, and Scott will jump in a second, but we're over here, you're looking at the year. So we went back to 2006 and 7. So this was a year before we had a lot of the extra science courses built in. Here you are, 2017 and 18. You notice our population in 06, 07 was 1,616 students. We were in the old building at that time. It was very cozy. I was there. It was enjoyable. It was tight hallways, and it was an interesting time. We are now at 1434 roughly, and you'll see some trends. You'll see here is the world language, and what we did is the percentages. So you're only looking at this slide. This is 12th graders, world language, math, and science. Not a requirement to take a 4th year. Our percentage in these areas have all increased. The biggest increase you can notice here is in the science, all right? We're looking at 75% of our population at that time, or 77, were taking a 4th year of science. And if you look at now where we are, we're at 95, almost 96% of our seniors are taking a 4th year of science. You see the trend increases in math, and you see the trend increases a bit in world language. The biggest increases in the science fields, which there's a lot of reasons for that, whether it's college-driven or whether it's interest-driven, it's happening. And if you see the time period in the shift, and yes, we added more science courses, but when you have that much of your population taking it, that's incredible. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's it. Now the next slide is 10th through 12th grade students taking 2 or more classes in the same subject area. And it follows the same timeline from 2006, 2007 population to 2017 to 2018, 1464. You see the decrease in English, you see the decrease in social studies, but you see a sharp increase in the, if you go over to the science, you see 20%, but what's telling is that's 20% at 1,464, where if you looked at 2006, 2007, you had 16% at 1616. So I look at it from a scheduler as something's giving. So they're gravitating to the math and sciences versus the English and social studies. But so next year, there'll be 222 students in my building taking 2 or more science courses. So now let's talk a little bit about the DAO, biology, chemistry expansion, and how it's helped address this issue. So Mr. Hughes has already gone over these 2 slides. I just want to highlight the 2 slides right there in the middle are the 6 lab are the truly for biology and chemistry. The 3 outer ones are the ones that have gas and water but could be used for other instructional purposes. So the numbers of the classrooms are up there, which has added 30 additional teaching periods available each day for biology and chemistry, the 5 classrooms times 6 periods, which has given another 120 additional periods available during a 4-day cycle. So if we take the 192 from the Lower Merion High School, we're adding 120 to that. So now we have if you take Lower Merion High School and the DAO, we now have 13 biology and chemistry classrooms. Each classroom is available 6 periods during a 4-day cycle. That allows me now 78 teacher periods available each day with a total number of 312 teaching periods available during a 4-day cycle. So you saw in 2016 and 2017 going into 18, we had a need. Now I'm going to show you from 2021 where I'm predicting where we're going to be into 2024 with the need of request and how many sections we're going to need available during a 4-day cycle. This just highlights the 5 more available for a total of 78. The 5 additional being available all 6 sets periods during the day. All right, teaching section calculations for 2020-21. We'll go up from 1660. So what I did is I used the current enrollment of 2016-17, and I took the 1660 and subtracted the 2016-17 number, which gave me a student population, and I divided that by 24 seats for a class. It gave me a total classes I would need based on the projection that students will continue taking a 4th year of science and taking 2 or more. We're going to be at 14 full-time biology teachers at 2020-21, and I'm going to have 2 part-time at 2021 with a 0.5 department chair and a 0.5 new hire. And they would need to teach then. The full-time teachers would need to teach 224 class periods. The part-time teachers would need to teach 16 class periods, which gives me a total class periods needed at 240. But I have 312, so within a perfect schedule, perfectly aligns, every student's happy, get all their requests, we would be able to, every student would be able to take the science course they wanted. Now let's go to 24-25. So we're going to have, we'll be at 1880. That's our highest enrollment, projected enrollment from the studies. And I take that number and subtract it from the 2016-17 number. I take that student number and then I divide it by 24. It gives me the number of science courses that they're requesting. That's going to tell me I'm going to need 17 full-time biology and chemistry teachers. Another one of that 0.5 becomes a full-time teacher. So then my only one part-time teacher will be the department chair. If you take those teachers, now they're going to need, the full-time teachers will need 272 class periods, and the part-time teacher with the 8, that gives me a total now of 280, again with the perfect schedule, with my unique skill, and I'm able to give everybody what they want, that we would be able to meet their needs. But now I just want to show without the DAO science classrooms. So in 2024, I just said we needed 280. If we didn't have the DAO building, you'd have to subtract the 280 minus the 192. You do the mathematics in there, you got 528 students out of the 1880. I have to tell them they're not able to take a science course they want because we don't have room. So I thank the board. I thank on behalf of the students. I do see the trend in math and science as a scheduler. I'll give some other data. This is just from 2016 this year, and then going to next year. In AP Bio, we're going up from 63 requests to 87. That's a 24 increase. AP Environmental Science, we're going from a 2016-17 64 to 110 next year. Genetics, I'm going from 76 this year to 107. That's a 31 increase. And then human anatomy, I'm going from 93 to 127.
Now those are request for next year?
This is, the first number was just finished. The second number is request for next year. So I'm just showing there's definitely a pattern in this area.
So that, I mean, I think the real, obviously, the real story here is without the district administration building, it's not that they wouldn't be able to take a science. What you've got is kids who are taking 2, 3, 4 more sciences than is required because that's what they want to do. They're in essence majoring in the sciences. And, you know, I actually think it's a great thing to be able to offer that in our community.
It's sad as a former social studies teacher, but I'm open to change at this age.
I can deal with it.
So thank you, boss. So as Scott, yeah, without the DAO, when we're looking at the thing, and just to think that the trend is continuing and will continue, you know, the availability of the DAO of this current building is helpful to sustaining the enrollment growth and increase. If somebody asks me, how about parking? That's not part of that. I can't answer that at the moment. So.
Let me continue on quickly here with a look at the site. This is an aerial shot of the site. I think everybody understands that the school site is split in two by Montgomery Avenue. So on the right-hand side, the north side of Montgomery, you have the new school plus the DAO. On the left, the south side, we have our athletic facilities. Just taking a look zoning-wise at what that means, and these are two separate parcels for zoning. Looking on the north side, we have about 21 acres, just a little bit more, a combination R1, R2, and we are maxed out on impervious surface. There's a few thousand square feet left there, but basically we are maxed out. If we take a look at Arnold Field, it's a little bit different zoning. It's a combination of R2, 3, and 4, mostly 3. We're allowed up to 28% impervious surface, and we have less than that, about almost 16%. So in terms of impervious surface, we have it. However, it is an athletic field, so you would expect those kind of numbers. Speaking of Arnold Field, very quickly, let me review. This is a summary from the master plan study that was done last spring for outdoor athletic facilities for the high school, which of course focused on Arnold Field. This is a diagram representing Arnold Field as you see it now. We have our synthetic turf field inside of our synthetic surface track. We have 4 grass fields, 5 tennis courts, track and field venues. The master plan looked at the entire program, including what was happening at the township parks that we use, South Ardmore and Vernon Young parks, and came up with a series of recommendations. Some of these are new construction, some of these are major maintenance activities that have to happen, and they've been identified in pieces so that they can be considered by the board and looked at one at a time. They don't necessarily, it's not a one thing. It's not a requirement that you do all of these or none of these things. So the first thing we're doing, and this is a project in progress now, we're replacing the surface of our artificial turf field. These were installed in 2006. We got our money's worth out of these fields, and so we're in the process of replacing that this summer. Another thing that's on the plan is renovation of tennis courts. That's in our 5-year plan. One of the pieces identified is to renovate the actual seating area on our grandstands as well as replace our visitor grandstands. Another one is to construct a new field house that would give us additional restrooms and concession area, and also renovate the spaces underneath our current grandstand. Probably the biggest piece of this is to convert 3 of those grass fields into an artificial turf field that would allow us to put baseball and softball on site, and then during the off seasons we would have 2 what they call overlay fields that could be used for playing things like soccer and lacrosse. So this is just a summary with cost estimates of some of these things. As I mentioned, we're doing the synthetic turf carpet replacement this summer. Tennis courts are in our 5-year plan. One piece that was identified as an improvement for South Ardmore Park was team shelters. Team shelters is an above-ground dugout. I'll take credit for coining that term, team shelter. People kept referring to them as dugouts, and I said, you know, there's nothing dug out about it. But we have these installed at Harriton, baseball and softball fields, and we think it's a necessary improvement at South Ardmore. More and more, we're increasingly sharing the requirements for maintenance with the township Parks and Rec people. So we're at the point now we have a design, we have a contractor, we have a price, and we're starting the process of getting the township to formally accept it before we can go ahead and install it. And these other things are things I've mentioned. Number F there dropped out of the plan at the last minute. The biggest piece of this, again, is the artificial turf conversion that would give us a baseball softball complex. That's also the biggest cost item in here. But the whole thing comes up to somewhere around $8 million.
I just wanted, Pat, to go into this because I think when we've been talking so much about other kinds of facilities, I didn't want this to get lost.
We'll pause a moment and have the board ask questions. As the board asks questions, if you're interested in making public comment or asking questions about Lower Marion High School or Arnold Field, please sign up with Mr. Orlando. And so I'll open it now, starting to my right, Dr. O'Leary.
Thank you for the presentation. Has summer school program or Saturday program, how much does that affect the use of the classrooms? How many kids are taking those, and is that providing any relief? In terms of the space needs in general, I know we have one class on Saturdays and a handful over the summer.
With summer school at Harriton, the spaces on Saturdays actually we did use in the current building the chemistry labs that were over there for Orgo. But now with the DAO, it's actually easier access for kids and parking out front that we just used them within this particular building. Summer depends on what depending on our usage during the summer. It's not actually mostly academic, but it's usually programs from the technology weekend camps that we use. But that's about it.
But there's some relief. So if we is Marcuse in there? Yeah. How many kids do we have?
I can tell you that this summer we're going to be running 2
Ms. Marcuse, can I get you to come to the mic for us? Thank you.
Happy to step forward. Good evening. So this summer we will be running 2 biology classes in summer school with approximately 16 students each. Because you can't run a class with 32 kids in the summer. So that will provide some relief, but you can be sure that those kids, for the most part, are taking chemistry then as 9th graders, which will then afford them the opportunity to take multiple advanced sciences as they move through their career. Additionally, this summer we are offering chemistry, also running, I think we're running a class of 1 section at 19. So, and we are running 1 class of physics at approximately 21 or 22. And those are all held at Harriton High School. And those numbers have held steady for the most part, about 2 sections of biology, 1 section of chemistry, give or take, because some years it's 2, some years it's 1, and 1 larger section of physics.
So if you take those, I got 32, 42, 56, that's about 60, 70 kids who theoretically, if they wanted those courses, would be taking them during the year. You could add those to those numbers. And then the number of students who take the organic chemistry on Saturdays, does anybody know that?
45.
45.
At Harriton. I can't speak to Lower Marion, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's that.
A little over 100.
And I think what we're seeing is an increased number of students who are taking the health online.
Correct.
Which we think is going to have an impact on taking even more sciences.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Going forward.
It does.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Those kids have already registered. To answer your question about health, Scott had already ran those numbers.
I pulled it, it was 2 years ago, that was the first cohort that they offered health in summer school. Majority of them had 5 or 6 projected because they'll be graduating next year, 5 or 6 total science courses within their high school career. When they take health, it allows them to take another science class, a science elective in the 10th grade year.
Or any elective.
Or any elective.
Yeah. So this summer, This summer, with the online offering of health, we have, if memory serves, approximately 180 students currently signed up for the MVP online health curriculum.
Mr. Driscoll.
Thank you for all the science talk, but as we get to 1880, are we planning to have the others, English, social studies, come over to the DAO? Is that in the works sometime?
Yes, eventually. What do we have, 7? We have 7 more classrooms. Each classroom, roughly, you figure about 100 more students. So we have 7 more universal classrooms over here, plus what we have. We should be fine in running all the programs that we offer. And that's still, there's other parts in the building at LM. We can look at DPC changing and making. We still have availability to maneuver some other classrooms.
At best you can predict, any issues with like your art classes? I know you had your art wing. Is that going to be an issue, or you need another art room perhaps, or too early to tell?
Too early to tell with the art, but there's other ideas of the ways you can run an art program within this schedule that we're working on at the moment. But right now, I think we're okay.
Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was very detailed. Very helpful to see all the details. How is passage time going to work out with the DAO and more usage of the DAO? Just to, if you could speak to that.
Sure, let Scott jump into that. I mean, we actually tested several times last year from the farthest part of the LM building to the chemistry building with a full backpack and everything else. And with 5 minutes, you clear it in 3 minutes and no issues. Even though the hallways are a little bit smaller and tighter within this area, the flow of traffic is really simple going up and down. We don't see any more issues within. I mean, they do have 5 minutes, and so far that's. If we could do it in the old building where you were all the way on one side, if you remember, the old building was part of Ardmore Junior High mixed to LM. You could make to one part of it. I mean, it was almost like walking a block or two, and you were able to do it. So we've kept the 5-minute walk.
And I think some of the plan moving forward would be, since it's chemistry is majority 10th grade, next year if we do add, there's one classroom on the corner, we might add a health teacher up there because that's a 10th grade class. And then we would have to probably bring in some 10th grade, so that would limit the amount of time that you're coming from one building to another building.
You good? To my left. All right. So public comment? Oh, sure. I didn't see you raise your hand.
Just a utilization question, perhaps. I mean, with the array of science courses that we offer, maybe it's a scheduling question as well. Is there any utilization factor that you use in terms of offering the courses? In other words, I imagine some of the higher level courses are more popular than others, and some are. Is there a minimum number of students that you need before you'll offer the course, or in other words, is it 10 or 5 or 15? If 2 kids want to have it, how do you work that? How does that factor in? I guess the second part of my question is, are the labs fully utilized for all the courses?
Yes, the labs are currently fully utilized. What we do with courses is we try not to run anything that goes past like a 15 mark. Or
below 15, you mean?
Below 15, yeah. We'll take a look. Is it a course, though, that it's a necessity based on kids, whether they need it or not? If you made the question about 2, if it's 2 students, there's the other options. You can do an independent study. I mean, we always try to work with the students to say, what are your options, and we'll go through everything as possible before we would say, sorry, we just can't absolutely do it.
And other than, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Other than organic chemistry, which is combined with Harrington, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Are there any other courses that you combine with Harrington to reach a number that would make sense to offer the course?
No.
No, because that's done on.
No.
It's done on a Saturday.
Yeah. It's not. We have LM teachers and Harrington teachers, but you can actually it's housed here though. Yeah. From the LM students and the Harrington students.
Organic chemistry is taught by 3 teachers. They are both Lower Merion and Harrington students. And it's here. And it's the 2 science classrooms up there, and it does have a removable wall between the 2, so it makes a mega You've got 12 lab stations, so sometimes they break them in two, and sometimes they have all working in one, and with 3 teachers going around. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was just wondering if there are any other courses that
There's
would
nothing
be
else that
suitable
we
for that.
combined, no.
In the past, we had talked about the possibility of doing a course remotely during the day so that it could be offered at LM and Harrington kids
Correct.
could call in, and then the
Correct.
teacher would be over at Harrington, and the LM kids could call. But that never got off the ground, right?
Well, it's only been based on student needs, where they say we have this, and then the 2 schools will talk to say, do you have any students that have this, and is there availability to do that with 1 teacher? We've usually been able to work out those scenarios before it ever got to that. 20 years ago, we used to offer some other courses on Saturdays, and we used to offer Colonial America and a couple other things through social studies, and I know that because I taught it. But it just interest. It just became less interest. So, and the Orgo on Saturdays, it all depends on interest. Like, we're running 3 sections, we've run 2 sections, and we've run 1 section. It just depends on what the kids are interested in.
Any others? Okay, Mr. Orlando.
Daniel Effern?
Hey, how are you? That's okay, I don't mind. Dan Rain, Winwood. Just a couple things. Wearing my Winwood Civic Association hat today more as head of the traffic committee of the Winwood Civic. I think LM has continued and continues to be the largest school, and for the foreseeable future will continue to bear the brunt of educating the children, as well as we have had the buses. And so I think that we've gotten away from the concept that I remember back in the day of the 2 equal size schools, and therefore, a lot of decisions kind of flow from that. And my concern is that as we force ourselves into more and more children at Lower Merion, that many more decisions will flow from that. Of greatest concern beyond the traffic, really is this facilities, not the field. A couple things is, I think the price tag and the requirements are totally beyond the scope. I think that, frankly, it was inappropriate and is inappropriate to have ELA be determining what is necessary and then also participating financially in what gets built from a standpoint of supervising and construction. I just don't believe that. I think it leads to strange decisions such as a large concession stand, which again, in 14 years living across from the field, I see absolutely no need for. 1,500 square foot communications, and I'm doing this from memory, just from being shocked. But I think some of the other things that are real concerns, I think, to the neighborhood are obviously the artificial turf, and how that would affect and change things, in addition to the fencing. And then, if we talk about unintended consequences of small decisions, eventually I think lighting and evening games and even more. And so I know those are not considered in the plan and not expected, but as I still remember when we were building the high schools. I still remember when they were doing a study to come up with two high schools of equal size, and I understand how we've gotten to where we've gotten, but I also worry about the disproportionate impact on the Lower Merion High School and the surrounding community of the decisions that get made along the way. And as I said, I think it's traffic, artificial turf, fencing, and lights are some of the concerns. But I speak only for the traffic committee. I can't speak as the civic itself. But thanks.
Catherine Grosh?
Let me just, if I can respond to Mr. Marino real quickly. In terms of the traffic, we're absolutely aware of the impact of traffic on the communities. I saw a traffic study that was done, Mr. Ganan, I'm going to say, is it 3 or 4 years ago?
2013.
2013. And I was surprised. The traffic study showed there was a significantly larger amount of traffic at Harriton, both in the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, than at Lower Merion. But we are asking the traffic engineer to come back and to do a new traffic study now to see what it looks like between the two schools. In terms of ELA, the ELA really is taking information that our athletic directors give about the sport usage and the team usage. So that's the ELA issue.
Good evening, Catherine Rowan Grosh. I'm from Marion Station. I do not have any high schoolers yet. I have very little kids, but I was here last month listening to all the elementary schools, which is where my oldest is at. And I'm curious, maybe it's just sort of a utilization of the schools and different scheduling. All the elementary schools sounded so tight. Like they were saying, you know, some of their spaces were adequate, but this was also like turning storage closets into music rooms, and a lot of like music and arts is on carts, and the auditoriums, forget how much space they have. They actually are being used for other things, so we have a tough time scheduling school auditoriums. And so I'm in trying to find a solution that we're all looking for in terms of a district. I guess part of my question is there anything we can learn from the high schools, which to me sound like, while they certainly have certain space concerns, at least in the case of Lower Merion, sounds like they are doing pretty well, and I understand they have this building here which has afforded them additional space. But is there anything we can do differently at the elementary level at all? I don't know, scheduling, anything like that, that would help us out, or are the schools just physically smaller and there's just, we need more land? Thank you.
So I think the difference, I think there are some things you can learn. One of the things we learned, or the district learned in terms of the high schools, and one of the reasons why I teased the superintendent at the time is there was a lot of discussion and a lot of criticism about building schools that were said to be too large and that you'd never need the enrollment for. And to be sure, over the last few years, Harriton has had a certain level of richness of space because it's roughly the same size as Lower Merion. When we get to Harriton, though, we'll see that space is going to get used, particularly when it comes time for science. So I'd say that the lesson learned is, as I indicated earlier in the presentation, that we should at least consider not just building for what we think is adequate, but building for what we, you know, with some factors that include growth or expanded programs. In terms of the scheduling, we do share staff. We do some things that will allow us to benefit it, but the elementary schools are tight on area, and so we get into do you need more parking? Do you need more impervious surface? And the construction issues can be overwhelming.
I realize I want to respond to what you said earlier, because I know that you have joined us relatively recently, and so in terms of the issue of the size difference.
Oh yeah, and I'm enjoying that.
Between, I'm sure, between Harriton and Lower Merion, the goal was to ensure that there were equal programming and co-curricular opportunities at the two schools, which the feeling was at that time was that you had to have a minimum of, I believe it was between 12 and 1250, maybe it was 1240 or 1260. I don't remember the exact number, but it was 1,000. Okay, and that was going to go. So the concern was that Harriton was much lower than 1,000, and Lower Merion was much bigger. So this board has remained committed to ensuring that the schools had enough capacity, enough of a critical mass to ensure equal programming at Harriton and Lower Merion and equal sort of co-curricular opportunities. So as they've gotten bigger, and I think the highest projected enrollment, looking at their numbers, at Lower Merion is 1,880, and then at Harriton is 1,589. those numbers, that critical mass is ensuring that that there are equal programming between the two schools and co-curricular programming. And the board had made decisions earlier to put money into Harriton until that number got to where there was a critical mass of students. So I just want to make it clear that this board has been committed to ensuring equal experiences at those two schools. I understand you've got concerns around the traffic, and I get that, but I want to make it clear to everyone that that's where the board's position has been, and I believe continues to be, as I think we'll be discussing shortly.
No, and I appreciate that. I think that actually that's been really helpful. I think that the fact that there is now more of a perception that the schools really are equal has enabled kids to continue to go there. However, for whatever from the neighborhood perspective, I can tell you that was the goal was to have two schools of equal size, and maybe that wasn't the school board's goal, but I think the equal curriculums from the neighborhood perspective was seen as a way of maintaining two schools of equal size. That hasn't happened, and my concern in this case is that the neighborhood surrounding Lower Merion will continue to bear a larger burden than many of the other neighborhoods, or I would say basically any other neighborhood. I do think I want to go address a little bit about the traffic studies. I am aware with the original traffic studies, and I think that it depends really how you look at the problem. If you look at the fact that there are small feeder streets going towards Harriton, absolutely, in a vacuum, you will always have Harriton as having a difficult time, let's say, in accessing it. And I think that that's where I think some of the out-of-the-box solutions might be helpful, because I think that in essence we're penalizing Lower Merion for already being on the busy street. And so, and I remind everybody that Montgomery Avenue is the second busiest street in the township, and that the section, which I've mentioned many times, between Penn Road and Schoolhouse Lane is the second deadliest section of road in Lower Merion Township. So I just want, more than anything, as you make some of the decisions, to think about that and think if there's any way to try to minimize as much as possible some of the effects on the neighborhood. And I think that maybe, and I'd be very interested in speaking to a traffic engineer, because I think that there's different ways of approaching this, because if it's going to be the same way as last time, I can tell you what the conclusion is going to be. No need to spend the money. So I think that that's important. I think the other thing is that I think that Harriton has become a big driving school, and I know children who specifically go there because they can drive there. And I know that there's issues, and watch Ricky reports and the traffic situation. And I think that there's he's
graduated.
Famous now.
We have a problem.
But I think that there are hard decisions that can be made as to how students come to school that maybe are beneficial to the community. And so, I just throw those things out there, just more asking you to take it into consideration, and just as a reminder of the burden that has been borne by the neighborhood, and if there's things that are possible that can be done, it would be great.
Thank you. We share those same concerns, and they will all certainly be taken into consideration. Okay. Oh, I thought you had something else to say.
I was at the Lower Merion Township meeting before I came here. They're having their building and planning committee meeting. On the agenda are 3 more projects. One got tabled. They're looking to add, there's a building that's vacant. They're looking to add 2 single-family homes in Kinwood Elementary, and they're looking to add 74 apartments in Kinwood Elementary across the street from their already approved another apartment building. So whether they bring kids or not, we can debate that. They're bringing cars, and those cars are going to be on Montgomery Avenue. So at some point, sitting here saying traffic is the school's problem isn't accurate. They're adding traffic and cars left and right, and I think at some point, someone's got to go to them and say, enough. So whether or not they get approved, I don't know. But
So to that, and I'd love to have a private
Okay,
conversation
I'm
with
sorry,
you.
so
but-
30 seconds, please.
Okay,
And then we need to move to the next presentation. We still have a
Absolutely.
whole new presentation.
I could not agree with you more as to what the commissioners are doing, and I actually think that there is much more criticism leveled towards them. I have been to the planning committee meeting. I have spoken. I have actually been stopped from speaking there, and I think that the multifamily housing in the township is being subsidized by the single-family homeowners, and I am, in my side job, going to do my best to show that. I have spoken to multiple commissioners in person about this, and I am by no way and by no means, I think the school has had to deal with a lot of the problems that have been created by the Board of Commissioners. So I would, I welcome any analysis, and I have asked the school board people to provide me with more data so that I can actually bring that to the attention of the commissioners, and I would 100% agree with you that this is coming from the commissioners, and that they might not have raised the millage rate, but they certainly have indirectly raised our taxes much more than anybody else.
Thank you.
We're going to move to
Please.
Harrington.
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein, less than 2.5 minutes. If you spell it, you.
You got it. I want to thank everybody for their stamina tonight. I want to thank Sean Hughes. I learned that he single-handedly designed the high schools I think he took credit for in his presentation. With Lower Merion going first and the high schools being built in 2009, while the layout's being very different, the facilities are the same in a lot of ways, almost the same square footage. While Lower Merion has a pool, Harrington has an additional gym on the physical plant. And while the layout's being different, the physical plants are very similar in a lot of ways. Many of our slides are mirror theirs in a lot of ways, so my presentation will be closer to 2.5 minutes than Welsh Valley's was 3.5 minutes. How did we get this slide? There we go. So this is our gymnasium area, and there's the additional gym that I was speaking of. There's a weight room over here, and this is our cafeteria area. And this is our first floor. Social studies is here. We have a health room here. And this is our auditorium area. And our art wing is housed around here. This is the main office wing. And along this hallway are several other things. Where I have the dot now is the nurse's suite. And along here, we also house the bus drivers in the district as one of their locations where they come. And we have a learning center, which a LGI, and a room 170, which the district uses for meetings occasionally. And there's our culinary arts area. Second floor is a big square. Here's our library facility. Our English classrooms are along this hallway. We have business classes along here and another additional English class. Our world language department is along this hallway. There's some special ed classes mixed in. DPCs, as Lower Merion has, Department Planning Centers for teachers. And here's our biochem rooms, which I'll focus a little bit more specifically in an upcoming slide. Our third floor is it is not a square. It is one long hallway. It is a couple special education classes. Mainly our mathematics department is housed up there, and also some bio and chem labs up here, which I'll highlight in a minute. Our core space, very similar to Lower Merion in a lot of ways. Our cafeteria will be pushed. We have some outdoor seating, so it's nicer when the weather's nice. But our lunch and learn model, as Mr. Hughes referenced, has allowed students to eat in different areas. We also have a satellite area where students can buy certain types of food that spaces it. And students have adjusted pretty accordingly of knowing the flow of when students are going in there. We also, in a survey, realized that about 48% of our students pack lunch. Our gymnasium and library areas we have found to be adequate. Our art and music at the moment are adequate, and judging by Lower Merion where they are at their 1434 number, and as we're heading that way, we should be okay. The same with family consumer science and tech ed, and special ed and gifted services. Here's some of the enrollment trends. We are projected at our highest projected enrollment to be at 1589. That's near 2025-26. And there you see where we are now. This presentation will look very similar to the one you just saw. This is highlighting just our physics labs, which are on the first floor. All 4 of these are for physics. Like I said, the high schools were designed similarly. So before they took over district administrative offices, they also had 12 science labs, 4 of them being physics, 8 being biochem. Our 4 physics labs live on the first floor. Second floor, we have 4 additional in this area right here. And in the third floor, as I showed you previously, they're in the corner of the math hallway. So the math is similar to what Mr. Kilpatrick and Mr. Hughes showed you. At capacity with our 8 bio and chem labs, we have 192 teaching periods. The math is the same as what you previously saw. That's the visual showing that the 6 sets, the 8 available labs, showing the math of 48 biochem periods. These are our offerings. A very similar slide to the one Lower Merion shared. The major difference here, and which adds a little bit complexity to our schedule, is the IB courses. Sean shared that Scott Kilpatrick had a lot of years in scheduling. Lauren Marcuson took over the master schedule this year and did a really nice job. The added complexity in building a master schedule is running somewhat of a school within a school. The IB program has designated requirements that students must go through to be on the diploma track, and we offer a diploma track program. And Mr. Fetterman's question earlier about class sizes and how that goes, Sean Hughes's bar was right. About 15 is the number. In certain classes that are needs, as he referenced, you need to run classes with smaller sections. Every once in a while, IB is the case where we'll run classes with fewer than 15 students in it because of that. And we offer additional science courses because of that. So this slide's almost similar with the addition of the IB, biochem, and physics that we offer. Here's a sample schedule. You went through one of those. We run the same schedule as Lower Merion runs, so this is a similar slide as you've already seen. Here's one with a chemistry teacher. It also shows the complexity that Mr. Hughes spoke of the lab. So one of the things that I think is an important talking point to understand the complexity of the schedule is when we're giving the numbers of what the scheduling would be and how many sections it would be, that's assuming 100% room utilization, which is impossible. So some of these numbers saying that this amount of students, I think Lower Merion just showed you over 500 students that wouldn't have a science course, that's an ideal 100% room utilization, which we wouldn't be able to run at because of the complexities of the way we use the labs and the additional lab requirements of AP courses and IB courses. Here are the calculations. Similar, the same math is used. The numbers are a little bit different because our population size is different. But the same logic that was showed by Mr. Kilpatrick and Mr. Hughes is the ones that we're sharing with you. We currently have, I'll focus down here, we have currently running 165 class periods of 192 available. With the math was already shown. We're going to be at 168 next year. That would be running at our 88% room utilization. If you would talk to any master scheduler, they would say that's a really good job of scheduling at that point. Out of the 192, so we're okay at this moment. As we shared with you, our enrollment is going up. Here's kind of a graph visual of that. We go to 1589 in year 2025. So current impact on enrollment growth, this is actually the same exact slide as Mr. Hughes showed, except the bottom bullet point shows the IB curriculum requires additional science that I already spoke to. Here are numbers of slides that they showed similarly. Trends are pretty similar. The math and sciences, we're having students taking more than the minimal requirements, where we're finding our students taking 4 years of language, math, and science. It's one of the reasons our schools are great and we're ranked so high as kids value these classes so much and are taking them in a large measure. Same slide here. You can see here that 182 students currently are taking more than one science class, and that this number is trending upwards. As our enrollment grows, we anticipate the growth to be similar. So here, I'm bringing you back to 17-18. Next year, we'll have 168 class periods needed out of the 192 available with our 8 labs. If we look at the mid-year point at 1433, we took that year to show you where we'll be in a few years. We'd be at 11.5 teachers. We have 3 part-time teachers. Our chair, our power coordinator comes out of the science department, so that makes him part-time. Our tech support, educational instructional support technology also comes from our science department. So it just shows our part-time is a little bit different than Lower Merion because of the way we utilize staff. And at 21-22, we would need, with the additional staffing and the sciences, we would project that we would need 200 sections, which at that point, with 100% room utilization, which we know we wouldn't get, we would still be able to tell at that point 48 students that they wouldn't have a science class.
So this is our target point then when we get into some issues.
And then we would project out to our highest projected enrollment a few years later, which, as I shared, was 1589. And now we're at 13 and a half full-time teachers. The math would take us to 232 class periods out of the possible 192 that we currently have with the 8 labs. Would at a perfect schedule, at 100% room utilization, would take us to 240 students that would not be able to get a science course. Here's just showing the math in a different way. You've been through this formula that's showing it. And here's kind of summarizing the impact. Currently, we ran a schedule for next year of 168 periods. We're fine out of the 192 there. In 21-22, we will be over that number, and in 25-26, we'll be significantly over that number. And Pat,
So,
yeah. So I'm sorry. I left out a key point that I would speak to. We know from Lower Merion's growth and the way they utilize the facility. In 21-22, we would need 2 additional classrooms to be able to meet the need, and by 25-26, we would need the 4 classrooms. We would surpass what Lower Merion is working with now. At 1443, we would go well beyond that number and need the additional classrooms to be able to, for each kid to have science, as we talked about as being our goal.
So so when we get to 2021, we would need 2 extra classrooms.
2 science labs.
Yes, biochem, I think.
Biochem labs, correct.
And what we would try and do is also construct them in a way that you could use them for physics too, if you needed to. We've done that with the district administration. Then, by the highest projected enrollment, just to meet the minimum, we would need 2 additional. So you're talking of 4 classrooms altogether. Now, we're going to show a concept that probably says you may want to build 6.
Okay.
But
All right. I just wanted to be clear.
Okay, well, the concept is this picture right here. We've looked at this in the past about how we would add on to the school. And this is if you recall, the schools were designed by architectural firm KCBA. We actually have Mr. Clough from KCBA here with us tonight. But back in 2013, we looked at this, and his folks came up with a concept where we could add on to the building where it is shown right here on the back side. Just to remind you, this is the 3-story section, and we would basically just continue that here, and we would have an opportunity to build additional classrooms on 3 different levels. Once again, a look at the site. Harriton is roughly 50 acres. We are pretty close to max impervious surface, even though with a big site like that, it means that we would have another 30,000 square feet of impervious that could be added. And of course, if we are going to add on to the school, we also have to consider things like the additional impervious that would be created and the stormwater management that would have to go with that, and then parking and traffic. So,
Do we have a sense of the cost at this point, or estimates, or?
We do. If you add 4 classrooms, if we do 4 classrooms, it was $5.1 million, and 6 classrooms was 6.2, was it?
It was higher than that. It was 7.
7?
Is that because they're science specific, or?
Yeah.
Damon, you want to?
And the location is amenable given where the other science labs are located, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And some of the issues are that it's, you can see where you're building it. It's not going to be easy to get to. Again, it's a small project, so your cost per square foot are higher. And because it's a science lab, it is a high level cost per square foot with all the mechanical systems and the casework and so forth. But I think for what we know now, we have some pretty good figures there for the board to consider.
All right. Oh, you have more, Mr. Benan?
the yellow things.
What's the yellow things? Oh, you're going to talk more about the, oh yeah, the buses. I have kids who ride the buses, please.
Right, so just a reminder that as school enrollment goes up, our routing guys have done a fantastic job over the last few years of squeezing more and more kids onto the same amount of buses. And it's to the point, you know they're doing it well when the drivers start complaining that, you know, they have less time between runs, et cetera, et cetera. So far, so good. So the first question people want to know is how many more buses will we need? So in order to do that, we kind of went back and took a 40,000-foot look at our operation. As of February this year, we were transporting about 7,000 students. We were using 66 large buses to do that. So we calculated a statistic of 106 per large bus. How many more students will we get? Well, based on the projections from Montgomery County or from Sundell, we're going to get anywhere from 1,042 to 1,062. So if we take the higher and divide the 106 into it, we get about 10 buses. So the answer is, how many more buses do you need? The answer to that question is about 10. The bad news is we don't have a place to put the 10. This is a map of the district. The little blue dots, if you will, represent where the students live. So again, for those who haven't seen this kind of a map before, most of our students live in this part of the school district. Most of the buses are kept out here at Matson Ford Road, with some buses at each of the high schools, 25 here, 24 here. These are maxed out. So the question then is, gee, where would you put more buses? Over the years, we've looked at a lot of places. This slide, we actually used this slide a few years ago, but this is really no joke. We have looked at a bunch of places, both inside and outside the district. Right now, the two candidates that we've left off with is one, an expansion at Matson Ford Road. In order to do that, we'd have to build a parking deck. The buses would not go on the deck. The drivers' cars would go on the deck, freeing up surface parking space for buses. However, it is an expensive project. There are concerns from PennDOT, and there are even more concerns from our neighbors, the West Conshohocken Borough and the Upper Marion Township. So we proceeded through a concept phase with that and then kind of put that on hold. The other opportunity is at Welsh Valley. And there was earlier discussion about that real estate where the church building sits now. We haven't done any planning for that. I don't have any cost estimates or anything, but that's a possibility.
That completes our presentation. I think that the takeaway, certainly at the high school issue, is if we want to continue to provide the same kind of course offerings for Harriton that we do for Lower Marion, we're going to need the same kind of construction expansion for science.
A huge thank you to the administration and our principals and Pat Ganan for such a thorough presentation. I mean, I counted up, we had a total of 6 presentations in this span of time. So I'll open it up to board questions at this time. Starting to my right, Dr. O'Leary.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure how to ask or how you answer this, but we always show the picture of the students living on one side and the fact that there's open spaces or buses on the other side. Is there some sort of concept of estimate of the cost difference between building a bus lot in the place you'd like it to be versus in a place you wouldn't like it to be, or a school? I mean, I guess the district isn't that big, but it's congested, so I'm trying to get a feel for how bad would it be if we had to build something way out where we didn't want to build it.
I think what you need to recognize is this representation shows population density. So you could say that there's, quote, open space in the western part of the district. What it really means is there's just a lower population density. Believe me, all that land is being used for something out there. Somebody owns it, and they're using it for something.
Well, but I think the question is, could we? I guess we could. We could calculate the distance that drivers have to drive, particularly at Matson Ford, and you could theoretically say, well, you could save money if there were an equally proximal place, because there's more routing that takes place over here. I think what we know is it costs more. I think we'd have to ask ourselves, given the fact that we don't have any space over here, what will we do?
And so, and I know, in particular, if we were to talk about a school out there, not just the buses, there's the expense of buses, and then there's the value of having a school in your neighborhood that would be lost because people, would have a couple of schools out there.
Sure, sure. It doesn't seem like a large area. What are we, 24 square miles?
Yes.
It's a complicated 24 square miles. It's not an easy 24 square miles. So it looks, it's harder than it looks, I'd say. When I was in New Jersey, I think we were 19 square miles. It was far easier to navigate.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that because there's also the issues where we've actually had people approach us to sell us properties around for the buses, and then obviously neighbors are concerned, and the township gets involved and all the rest of it, and we actually have more ability to locate buses on one of our school properties. It's much easier for us to do that than it is to actually buy a different property, and that's got to come into the consideration as well. And so, when we can't build in one place, then the next obvious place becomes the school, and it's easier to actually to do that. So I mean, and we're at the point now, I think, where we don't have any options. We've been boxed out of a lot of places with for all kinds of reasons. So there is some of it where I think people don't realize that when decisions get made in one place, it's actually making decisions in other places.
To my left, Diane.
Thanks. A comment and then maybe some good news. So the comment is, while I understand we want to make sure that we have equal opportunity to the two schools, and we want ideally to provide, however many science opportunities as a student wants to take, and I agree with those goals. We keep saying that there'd be 240 kids who wouldn't get a science, or there'd be 100 kids who wouldn't get a science. It's more accurate to say who wouldn't get a second science. Just in looking at the numbers as they were presented, you had the slide that said how many students were taking two sciences, and it's like 182 at Harriton this year are taking two or more sciences. So I assume those wouldn't be the kid. You wouldn't close the kids out who were only taking one science. You would close out the kid who's taking the second science. So it's a minor point, but it's semantics, but we're not prohibiting a science from a student. We might have to limit a second science to a student. So, so it's a big deal, but it's not the same as not allowing a kid to take a science at all. The second comment that I have that I think might actually be a little good news. So, in looking at Pat's calculations on the buses, if we get 1,062 additional students, you're saying that would be 10 more buses? That's only 10 more buses of all 1,062 students are in the same division, because we have 3 separate tiers. So really, there'd be 400 in the high school, 300 in the middle school, 300 in the elementary school. So we only need to accommodate 400 kids, say, not.
This is what I said was like a really broad overview, looking at the entire system. So the way I interpret this number is it does take into account all tiers of busing. Because obviously you can't put 106 kids on a bus. You can only put 72 on a bus if you put them 3 to a seat. So I understand your point. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. When I first started looking at this 4 years ago, I tried to get down to the nitty-gritty details, elementary school, middle school, how many kids, how many walkers, all this stuff, and I consistently overestimated how many buses we were going to need. So I decided, and we did review this with our school bus consultant as well, to take a much more broader view, like a 40,000-foot view, to try to get a feel for this. But I think what you're talking about is incorporated into this.
So you do think that it's going to be 10 additional buses per each tier?
No, it's going to be 10 total.
Right, but the same bus gets used for each tier. So
Right.
You're going to need 10 buses for the first tier. You're going to need those same 10 buses for the second tier, and you're going to need the same 10 buses for the third.
Correct.
Okay, please.
Just a quick comment. There's tremendous presentation tonight of all this very detailed, granular material, and I think it requires, at least as for me, a lot of digestion, so to speak, in order to appreciate all the details, particularly with the science labs and the way the statistics were provided. I think it would be helpful to have even another session to give us more information in terms of how those numbers are calculated, and who, just following on what Diane was suggesting, is just understanding who those students are who would not be getting a science course. In other words, who are those kids and what courses would they not be getting? I mean, just so to understand exactly what we're talking about. And the other question was in terms of Harriton, is the only reason that we would need to build the additional classrooms is because of the science need for the science labs? Yes. So, well, what's happening with the other classrooms? I mean, is there any possibility, for instance, of converting classrooms that are already there into labs?
We looked at converting the classrooms into labs, but if you're gonna convert them to look like the science labs that we currently have, that means you'd probably need 3 classrooms to get 2 labs. Is that a fair statement?
And our room utilization is already at 88, 89. I would say across the board, we're very efficient. The schedule that's built is fairly efficient, if I may say so myself. So I would say we're probably operating at about 86, 88% room utilization. And as mentioned earlier, as somebody who's been in the district since proudly for 16 years and a resident of this community, I remember when we were at 76% at the start of our new building because we had that room to give, and now we certainly, are encroaching at the maximum for a high school room utilization.
Just wanted to add a point around the science lab. One of the important pieces from the board has been parity across schools, the high schools in particular. So given that we made the decision to build the science labs and those opportunities afforded to our students here at Lower Merion, we certainly, want to look very seriously and thoughtfully at how we offer that same opportunity to the students at Harridan. Because at some point, we made that decision. And so, following through with that and honoring that commitment, I think is critical. So, any other board questions?
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we don't maintain parity. I was just trying to clarify the way it was being presented.
Any other questions?
I mean, but even if they're not in a science room, they have to be in a room. So we have, I mean, we still will need capacity space, whether you're taking AP Science or AP English, you got to be in a room somewhere.
When you build a schedule, it's not like dealing a deck of cards. Everybody gets 4. There are the kids vote with their feet. They decide where they want to go, and you're trying to get things to fall. So the first thing you have to deal with is you have to deal with your singletons. Your physics honors excruciatingly hard, course where there's only going to be one. And then the problem is the number of kids who are taking those courses will determine, somewhat. And so you can't have a perfect 100%. You don't want it. So in order to schedule efficiently and effectively, you want some extra space. I mean, we said in the beginning, did a number of charts on the number of kids taking multiple sciences. So I think that was, pretty well disclosed. And the fact that, that we think that's going to increase even more than it has over the years.
Any public comment? All right.
Great, thank you, public. Terrific.
So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Please complete our survey. This presentation will be on the website, if it isn't already, certainly by tomorrow, correct? Okay, and have a great summer. Thank you very much.